but colder air is on the way than this during the next few days. At the moment, we've got a chilly easterly breeze. That will be, moved out of the way by this increasingly cold northerly wind during the next couple of days, which will bring some snow showers to places. Well, for the time being, any showers out there are mostly rain, and they're mostly affecting eastern parts of the country. One or two making their way into the Midlands, Wales, Northern Ireland, some southern counties of England as we end the day. But the showers in the south will move away, the showers inland will tend to ease, and the showers across the north will pick up pace, especially for northern Scotland as the northerly winds arrive. But for most, we'll have enough cloud, enough of a breeze to prevent a widespread frost as we begin Tuesday. Just a touch of frost for North Wales, the Midlands, parts of Northern Ireland, for example, because of the clearer spells here. And increasingly, the cloud will break up. So we're going to swap the cloudy easterly for a much clearer, crisper northerly during Tuesday. Plenty of sunshine in the south and the west. Further areas of cloud and showers into the north and the east in particular, and an increasingly cold northerly wind. So mid-single figures for many, but feeling colder in that wind. And the wind's going to drag freezing air from the Arctic. So for northern Scotland on Tuesday night, the snow level coming down, and it looks like by the end of the night, snow falling at all levels for the north of Scotland. And there'll be a widespread frost elsewhere, with clear spells more likely across western parts of the country, and even in towns and cities, -2 or -3 Celsius. In the countryside, lower than that. Nevertheless, a bright start to the day for many. Some areas of cloud in the east and the north, along with some showers. Mostly these are rain and hill snow showers, but for northern Scotland, the snow building up at lower levels, 2 to 5 centimetres, over hills, 5 to 10 centimetres, could cause some issues.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio or online, every morning it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. It's Patrick Christys right here on GB News. Let's kickstart your week with the very latest asylum seeker hotel madness, lockdowns linked to kids with Strep A, Meghan and Harry's latest Netflix trailer, and Keir Starmer wanting to abolish the House of Lords. We start with tough words from the Home Secretary as a new report suggests offshore processing, rapid Rwanda deportations and pulling out of the ECHR are the way to go when it comes to combating illegal immigration. But get this, it comes as one local council was given just 15 hours' notice to house 80 asylum seekers in its third migrant hotel. And we basically, as it turns out, have an open-door immigration policy with Afghanistan, Syria and Eritrea. Wait till you see those figures. Plus, Keir Starmer, once a man so wooden birds nested in him, has dared to enlighten us with some Labour Party policies. That's nice of him. Starmer has been setting out his vision for the future. He wants to abolish the House of Lords. We take a closer look at the pros and cons of that. Massive concern now, massive concern amongst UK parents as 7 children have sadly died from Strep A. But what's caused this fresh outbreak? What are the symptoms and how can you make sure that you keep your kids safe? And Harry and Meghan. They've released a new trailer for their Netflix documentary. They've gone heavy on the racism, they've gone heavy on the sexism, and they appear shocked that the royal family, yes, the royal family, has a hierarchy. Who knew? As ever, I'm keen to hear from you on all of this. GBViews at gbnews.uk. Get your views coming in thick and fast when it emerges as I reveal the figures that we've got basically an open-door asylum policy with Afghanistan, Syria and Eritrea, and of course the latest on that Harry and Meghan Netflix documentary. Let's be honest, you probably will watch it, won't you?
Good afternoon, it's 3 minutes past 3. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date. Parents are being urged to look out for Strep A symptoms amid rising infections caused by the bacteria. At least 6 children have died with an invasive form of the infection in recent months. More than 850 cases were reported in the week starting the 14th of November, compared to over 180 for the same period last year. Downing Street, though, has stressed that the NHS is well prepared and there are no shortages of the antibiotics needed to treat the infection. Dr. Chris Smith says if the symptoms are caught early enough, it's easily treatable.
If you've got a bright red flushed appearance on your cheeks, that could be that you've got scarlet fever. This is one sign that the infection is becoming more significant and it could then become an invasive infection. If a person doesn't get better with the normal trajectory of a cold, they've got those rash signs, they're also showing other signs of deterioration, then you should definitely seek a second opinion from your GP. And the good news is that if caught early, these strep infections respond reliably and reassuringly to cheap and cheerful, very safe antibiotics like amoxicillin.
The RMT is being urged to think again about staging rail strikes which threaten to bring travel chaos over Christmas. Number 10 says the current offer of an 8% pay rise over 2 years, as well as a guarantee of no compulsory redundancies before April 2024, is fair. That was rejected by the union, which says the deal won't protect its members and will lead to unsafe practices. The Education Secretary, Gillian Keegan, says the offer should have been put to the union's members.
Well, the government has facilitated the conversations between the unions and the rail companies, and it is disappointing that the RMT union have rejected a new and improved offer that was being worked on over the weekend by the rail companies. I believe they've rejected it, not put that to their members. But this is disappointing because we would expect those talks to continue and for those offers to be put to members.
The Labour Party says it will look at abolishing the House of Lords if it wins the next general election. They've described the current system as indefensible. Sir Keir Starmer set out his blueprint for a new Britain, promising the biggest ever transfer of power from Westminster to nations and regions if his party is elected. Launching a report which was led by the former Prime Minister Gordon Brown, he promised to overhaul the way the country's governed.
This broken model has held back our politics and held back our economy. And I'm determined we unbind ourselves and free our potential. Britain is one of the most centralised systems in Europe, and the centre has not delivered. Now, I don't want it to fall apart. I want us to build something new.
England forward Raheem Sterling has flown back to the UK from Qatar after his home was broken into. Surrey Police says watches and jewellery were stolen, but confirmed that Chelsea winger's family weren't in the house at the time of the robbery. Manager Gareth Southgate says the family is the most important thing and couldn't say whether he'll return to play this weekend. Well, England will take on the reigning champions France in the quarter-finals on Saturday. Bukayo Saka scored against Senegal last night in the 3-0 victory. He believes England have nothing to fear in their upcoming last-eight clash.
There's no doubt, the quality we have in our team. We're blessed with an amazing front line with so much quality attacking players, and when you get selected in that lineup, it shows how much confidence and trust the coach puts in you, so it gives you that extra confidence to go out there and shine, and last night you were able to do that.
The Met Office has issued a severe cold weather warning for England later this week. Daytime temperatures are going to plummet to freezing. It could drop as low as -10 overnight as Arctic air moves across the country. Healthcare services are advised to protect high-risk groups. The Met Office are urging people to look out for vulnerable family and friends. A yellow alert for snow has also been issued for Wednesday, covering northern Scotland. Prince Harry's spoken out about the pain and suffering of women marrying into the royal family, calling it an institution. The latest allegation was made in a Netflix docuseries that airs this week.
There's a hierarchy of the family. There's leaking, but there's also planting of stories.
There was a war against Meghan to suit other people's agendas.
It's about hatred. It's about race. It's a dirty game. The pain and suffering of women marrying into this institution, this feeding frenzy.
I realized they're never going to protect you.
I was terrified. I didn't want history to repeat itself.
You're up to date on GB News. I'll bring you more as it develops. Now back to Patrick.
The sheer scale of the migrant crisis is now coming home to roost. On the day that the Home Secretary says that she'll do whatever it takes to tackle the Channel migrant crisis, it's been revealed that one local council was given just 15 hours' notice to house 80 migrants in its third asylum seeker hotel. The Times has also reported that we essentially now have an open border policy with Afghanistan, Syria and Eritrea. Get your heads around this, people. We're allowing 98% of applicants from those countries to stay here. That's on top of 87% from Sudan and 82% from Iran. They apparently make up 33,000 of the predicted 50,000 that we will have coming across the Channel. So those numbers are vast, and it's because of a two-tier system where the backlog is so big that we're rushing these people through. These figures have just dropped. Why? Well, it is because of that massive backlog. We are rushing them through, and I think we can all agree massive concerns there over public health and safety. Today is a big day for the migrant crisis because a new report from the think tank Centre for Social Policy said that the recommendations, anyway, it released were these. Introducing ID cards, this is mainly for people coming over the Channel, of course, stopping those who enter the country illegally from settling in the UK, striking new deals for countries other than Rwanda to detain migrants offshore. It also calls for changes to human rights laws and for Britain to withdraw from the ECHR. Well, the Home Secretary wrote in the foreword of this report, although that she says she doesn't basically believe every single recommendation, specifically ID cards. The Tories are not big fans of ID cards. The report author and former advisor to Theresa May, Nick Timothy, remember him? He spoke to Emily Carver on GB News about the importance of his think tank's proposals. Check this out.
It's a big thing for a Home Secretary to write a forward in such positive terms for a report that contains policies in this way. So I think what we can know is that she and the government are positive about the sense of direction that the report sets out. Modern Slavery Act is good legislation. It's important legislation. It's designed to protect people from being trafficked and from being forced into labour against their will. But unfortunately, it is increasingly being used by people who are illegal immigrants or people whose asylum claims are not going as they had hoped. And so we have some proposals to tighten up the Modern Slavery Act by changing evidential thresholds, trying to prevent people from making claims in a kind of tactical way late on, and if necessary, where there is evidence of serious widespread abuse, excluding nationalities from the provisions of the Act until order is regained.
OK, so it is a massive day for the ongoing migrant crisis. That report has just dropped, essentially, from the Centre of Social Policy, outlining exactly what Nick Timothy was saying there. But stuff that we already knew, really, wasn't it, in terms of maybe wanting to introduce ID cards, get out of the ECHR, process people offshore. These aren't new, are they? Anyway, meanwhile, the head of housing at Lancaster Council has written to the Home Office to express his anger that the local authority were given 15 hours' notice to house 80 migrants in a local hotel. In fact, I've just done some digging on this, and they already have 2 hotels, migrant hotels in that area, with a combined total of 221 asylum seekers in there. So you add the 80 to that, of course, people are up in arms, saying there's been no consultation. But a rather telling quote, and I wonder whether or not other council leaders are going to have the bottle to reveal this as well. They are concerned about the fact that, and I'm quoting now, conflict is inevitable. Conflict, they say, is inevitable between members of the local community and some people in these hotels. Your views on all of this, gbviews at gbnews.uk. The Conservative MP for around the area is David Morris, Tory MP for Morecambe and Lonsdale. I'm very pleased to say he joins me now. David, thank you very much. It's good to see you again. I've not seen you for a little while. I, of course, used to work up in your neck of the woods at the ever-popular Westmoreland Gazette newspaper. There we go. I thought I'd get that in. But, look, you know, it's time to get serious, really, David, with you and I, because this is a very serious issue. And in and around your area, 3 migrant hotels, 15 hours' notice to house 80 of them. What's going on?
Well, in my area, actually, Patrick, in Morecambe, it's just one hotel. We've got 2 hotels now. I was given 2 hours' notice at 7 a.m. on Saturday morning, saying that 80 or so migrants were going to be going into a hotel literally in the centre of Morecambe, in the west end of Morecambe, on the prom. I ended up texting the minister, and to be truthful and fair, we were sorting out from that moment on. On Sunday afternoon, I had a high-level meeting with the officials at the Home Office, and we got that sorted out that it's a temporary stay for only a matter of weeks. Now, of course, you know, I wasn't born yesterday, and I'm watching this with bated breath, but I am monitoring this, and I am looking for further meetings with the ministers.
Yeah.
And in all honesty, I've only just got into work because of the trains. Otherwise, I would have been there for the statements before.
Well, no, exactly. It's important for me to make that distinction. The Lancaster area just borders Morecambe and Lonsdale. They've had a couple of hotels there, the Morecambe area as well, now on top of it. So it's that region, really. But I was reading with interest, actually, a statement by a member of the Lancaster Council, which I know is slightly out of your brief, but raising serious concerns about the possibility for, as they said, inevitable conflict between some people who are staying at these hotels and members of the public. Now, I know that area well, and I know it's welcoming, but actually is conflict inevitable if these numbers continue?
You're right in what you're saying. We are a welcoming society. You're from the area. You know exactly what it's like in Morecambe. You know my area. We're friends. You know all this. We are very welcoming in the Morecambe area, but it's like everything. If you've got such a dramatic disruption, a very quick dramatic disruption on this scale, you know, it's going to have adverse effects in the local community people who live there, as well as the people who you're hosting. So, you know, my concern was the fact that they were just literally dropped on our doorstep. And from what I can gather...
Oh, that's all right. Well, look, I think we've lost David, but it's all right, because I wanted to actually fill you in anyway on a startling development today. So basically, the gist of what happened there was, of course, that there was another migrant hotel, this time popping up in the Morecambe and Lonsdale area. That local MP, he said he was only given a few hours' notice. The local council was given just 15 hours' notice to house 80 of these people. And a really interesting quote here, I'll just read to you from somebody who is head of housing at Lancaster City Council before I go back to David. Community cohesion has become a significant risk in the district as a direct result of the utilisation of 2 contingency hotels. If this third hotel goes ahead, conflict at one of the sites within the wider community is inevitable. Now, that, I think, has taken a very long time for someone who's in a council to actually come out and say. And this doesn't mean that there's racism involved there. It may well do, but you'd like to think it wouldn't. It is just a question simply of logistics. If people are seeing the fact that these hotels are being used, these are tourist areas. Let's be honest, a lot of these people come from different cultures, potentially with different values, and it is not massively outlandish to suggest that at some point there may well be conflict there, especially when it's emerged. I'll bring David back in now. I think we've got him. Have we? David Morris, Conservative MP for Morecambe and Leeds. David, yes, thank you very much. I just wanted to get your take on something, really, which has dropped today in the Times, which is it appears as though we have a bit of a two-tier asylum system now. We've got a massive backlog. We all know that we've got a massive backlog, and the fault of that is not singularly with this government. But what apparently has been taking place is that they've been waving through people from Afghanistan, Syria and Eritrea with just one round of security checks, as opposed to previously they'd get others. Do you think that the British public have a right to be concerned about public safety at the moment when it comes to the asylum crisis?
I think people are very concerned about this. I mean, I'll be truthful with you, I've not even seen that report, but I take your word for it if that is what it states. But what the problem that we have here is we've got a lot of illegal immigration and organised crime assisting that. And of course, it's how we actually deal with it. We've also got the post-Brexit era where, even though we've left the EU, we've not left Europe in effect, but we're having terse relations, shall we say, with our neighbours, our European neighbours. So we really do have to change our laws in the UK and make sure that they work for us. But then it's a big problem of trying to get those laws recognised on the other side of the channel, because now we're not in the EU anymore. It's going to be a very hard task to do that. And I think that if you're looking at what the Immigration Minister wants to do in the Home Secretary, they want to amend certain laws that we've already got. And I think that's the best way ahead. The main thing that we have to start to do is to start to deport people who are coming across here illegally as quick as possible and not have all the legal backlog, shall we say, that slows it up. We have got a serious problem here in the UK. Sadly, it's been exacerbated by people who want to come here because they want a better life, and you can't blame them for that.
No,
but what you've got at the end of the day is people coming from other countries, 3, 5, 6 different countries to get here, and they're claiming asylum, which is not exactly what the spirit of asylum is about.
No, look, David, thank you very, very much. David Morris, our Conservative MP for Morecambe and Lunesdale, just whizzing you through a whole smorgasbord of different issues as we kickstart this week with yet more, essentially, asylum seeker madness. A couple of quick things if you're just joining us to whiz you through. A new report dropped today, Centre for Social Policy, saying that, really, we should do what we've been talking about doing for a long time, get out the ECHR, get those deportation flights taken off and maybe get more people processed offshore. The Home Secretary has said that she wants to do a lot of this apart from the ID cards thing. She's not a big fan of ID cards. It comes as news emerges that 98% of people claiming asylum here from Afghanistan, Syria and Eritrea have essentially been granted asylum with stripped back security checks, which I think will concern a lot of people. And as well, more hotels, one local council in that area given 15 hours notice to house 80 asylum seekers in its third migrant hotel. A seaside town relies heavily on tourism. You do the maths there. But we're just moving away from that now. We're going to return to it throughout the show. But I want to look at, frankly, what Britain would look like under Labour, because Sir Keir Starmer he's dared to give us an insight today. It's nice. It's only been a couple of years. He set out his blueprint for what he calls a new Britain. Crucially, not new Labour, new Britain, wresting power away from Westminster and giving more of it than ever before to the devolved nations and the English regions. Launching a report which was led by former Prime Minister Gordon Brown, he promised to overhaul the way the country is governed. And this is the standout line from it, really, although arguably it shouldn't be, is he wants to look at abolishing the House of Lords. Let's cross live now to our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, who is in Leeds for us. Hey, good stuff, Darren. And that's where Sir Keir Starmer and former Prime Minister Gordon Brown unveiled these plans earlier. Darren, there's quite a lot to unpack here. Let's start with the House of Lords stuff, if that's all right. Take it away.
Yeah, indeed, a blast from the past in many regards. Gordon Brown back on stage behind a Labour lectern today. As you say, he's been working on this report for the last 2 years. The most eye-catching initiative is that desire to see the House of Lords abolished altogether, to be replaced by an entirely elected chamber. Now, many people, including the Labour leader, have said that the House of Lords at the moment is essentially indefensible, i.e. it's bloated to over 800 members and been linked with cronyism. Lots of MPs have decided to pack the chamber with some of their mates who may have done favours with them or for them in the past. In saying that, is a fully elected chamber the way that many would want to go? You'd lose the expertise of many members who've actually done some pretty big jobs in the past. And as Tony Blair found out, when you try to do these things, they're a lot easier said than done in many regards. Patrick, he wants to get rid of all the hereditary peers. There's still dozens and dozens of them left in the chamber, but Sir Keir Starmer is, he says, determined to do this, and in his first term as Labour leader. It's part of a wider package, as you say, of trying to restore what he calls is a kind of more democratic system where power is not concentrated in Westminster. 50,000 civil servant jobs moving outside of London, more powers, as you say, to the devolved regions of England and to the nations as well. MPs not being allowed to have second jobs. His argument is that levelling up all sounds great, that the Northern Powerhouse all sounds great, but in the end, if local communities can't make these decisions, then bad decisions are made. And he was making the point that even though he backed Remain in the Brexit referendum, he would argue that Brexit's about taking back control, but that doesn't necessarily mean just to Parliament at Westminster. It should be to local communities too. As I say, though, the proof is in the pudding. Politicians talk about constitutional reform all the time. Doing it is a hell of a lot harder than making speeches about it in Leeds. So we'll wait and see. But of course, it all depends on whether he gets into power in the first place.
Well, it does, absolutely. Just something that I thought maybe went under the radar slightly, potentially quite a shrewd political move from Sir Keir Starmer, actually, was to have Gordon Brown facilitating it as the calls for Scottish independence certainly grow louder, whether or not that's reflected massively in the polls. The calls are growing louder. Gordon Brown very staunchly in favour of keeping the union together. Himself, of course, the Scot, himself now proposing anyway more devolved powers to the various union countries. This could be quite a clever way of actually keeping the UK together, could it not?
Yeah, I mean, that's been talked about in the past. Clearly one of the desires and one of the driving forces for Scottish independence, or indeed Welsh nationalism, or you could say the same maybe about Northern Ireland as well, and the different regions, is that people feel that Westminster in London is a long way away, that it's not necessarily terribly representative of what they would like to see in their local communities. Though there is a counter-argument, Patrick, suggesting that actually one of the ways that Labour tried to stymie, particularly Scottish independence, in the 1990s was with the introduction of the Scottish Parliament, but that it's actually driven an independence movement, that, you know, the desire for some powers led to the desire for more and more. So it's quite difficult to work out. But I think this is an interesting political move by Labour. You know, the House of Lords isn't necessarily roundly popular in the country. I'm not sure it's going to win lots of votes, but at least allows them to set out an argument that when the Lords gets themselves into trouble again, or whether people say there's not enough power in my local community, they can say, well, you know what, we've actually looked into this and we've got a 155-page report. Go and read it and see what you think. It is at least some policy, some flesh on the bones, of which there's been criticism that there's not been enough of that from this Labour leader thus far. Yeah, absolutely. At least we're hearing something. It means that we can either agree or disagree with something that Keir Starmer is doing. Darren, thank you very much. Darren McCaffrey there from Leeds for us. Now, you are with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. Loads to come, including doctors are urged to promptly prescribe antibiotics for scarlet fever. We will ask a GP what signs of Strep A parents should look out for. It's a big one, this. How concerned should you be? Just very quickly as well, I want to give a little nod to my inbox, gbviews@gbnews.uk. A lot of it kicking off about what's been going on, essentially, as it's emerged that we've got all but, in name only anyway, an open door asylum policy when it comes to Afghanistan, Syria and Eritrea. 98% of asylum applicants from those parts of the world, those countries, allowed in with minimal and road-back security. How do you feel about that? And it has kicked off in the inbox. GB News about Meghan and Harry's latest interjection. Their Netflix documentary is going to be dropping on the 8th and then the 15th of December. Some people have accused them of trying to cash in on Diana's death. I'll be back in a moment.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Yes, well, how concerned should we all be about Strep A? The UK Health Security Agency has urged GPs to treat cases of scarlet fever promptly with antibiotics because of fears over that spread of Strep A. 7 children sadly have died after contracting the bacterial infection, which can cause scarlet fever. Levels of the disease are higher than expected for this time of year. Now, the government said this afternoon that it can fully understand that parents are concerned by rising Strep A cases, but it's stressed the NHS is well prepared for these situations. It's urged parents to be on the lookout for symptoms. Understandably, parents are deeply, deeply concerned, and people have been left scratching their heads as to exactly why this is happening now. But joining me is Dr. Lawrence Gurlis, GP and CEO of Same Day Doctor. Dr. Lawrence, great to see you on the show yet again. Hi. Now, OK, all right, before we get stuck into exactly what is happening, I'd quite like to ask you why this is happening. And despite the fact that this report that has come out into it, the latest report, appeared to indicate that a lack of child mixing during lockdown is one of the reasons for it, I have had a procession of doctors, usually, by the way, the same ones that told me things like, you know, coronavirus definitely came from a meat market in Wuhan and that the vaccine was 100% effective against everything. They are lining up now to say that the lockdown had naff all to do with it. Are they right?
No, they're not right, Patrick. I've been saying to my patients for the last 3 months now, we've seen a lot of respiratory infections, and I've been saying, well, we didn't see any for 2 winters, 2 whole winters. We didn't see coughs and colds because people were stuck in their houses. And suddenly we've seen a huge number of these because people are out and about, but they're picking up bugs to which they've got no immunity. And I think Strep A is the latest in that list. So in my mind, and I've been saying this for some time before Strep A came along, the lockdown has decreased our levels of immunity to these infections. So in my mind, there's no doubt about that at all.
So are you concerned that this is just the start of something that actually, as we enter the flu and the cough and the cold season, everyone tends to get ill around the December time, and not just because they want to wangle a few extra days off over the Christmas period? Are we actually potentially going to be seeing higher outbreaks of illness amongst children as a result of lockdown? Is that coming to fruition now as we speak?
Possibly. Look, I don't want to add to the panic. Bear in mind, we've come out of a pandemic which to some extent was driven by panic from other sections of the mainstream media. So I don't want to add to that. We're not seeing a rise in COVID. There was a peak a couple of months ago. That's not come. We've not had a flu epidemic yet this winter, and some predicted that might come, but fortunately not. This is a very real epidemic. I've been working pretty much non-stop this weekend. Bear in mind, the news dropped heavily on Friday evening, just when the GPs all closed, because they're not contracted to be open Saturdays and Sundays. I worked extra hours on Saturday just to keep up with the demand. We're busy yesterday, we're busy today. Partly, I mean, we're seeing we were picking up positive strep swabs over a week ago before the news came out, and added to that a huge amount of anxiety from parents, which is understandable.
This is a concern. This is a concern. If we are seeing, children have died. I believe the latest is 7 children who have sadly passed away as a result of strep. But are we now seeing the NHS potentially, well, in lack of full force yet again, which is that if parents are seeing something that they might not know what the symptoms are, they want to go to the GP, and then the GP is shut at a weekend, so the kid's off from school, which might be the time you take them to the GP, and they can't get there. What are the symptoms when it comes to strep A, and how quickly can it spread? I mean, how important is it that GPs are open more?
Well, look, I understand that accident and emergency departments were teeming this last weekend because people couldn't get to the GP. And I'm afraid this has come at a very bad time when GP access, for a number of reasons, including shortage of GPs, is worse than ever. The main symptoms to look out for are a fever at greater than 38 degrees, particularly in a young child under 6. If they've got a red tongue, strawberry tongue, if you can see their throat and it looks red with swollen tonsils, if a child says they've got a sore throat, if they're old enough to describe it, or stops eating and drinking because their throat is so sore, those are the key things. There's a rash that I saw a 2-year-old on Saturday. I mean, it scared me to see a rash like this. I haven't seen one of those for years. Okay. A red blanching rash. It's not the purple rash of meningitis. It's a bright red rash, and the skin can actually peel back. So Streptococcus A is a nasty infection. I've been saying for years, don't dismiss every sore throat as a virus, because at your peril, you will miss one of these. And we've forgotten scarlet fever and indeed rheumatic fever, which damages heart valves, can affect the kidneys as well. So we need to take this very seriously. And doctors have been advised to have a low bar for prescribing antibiotics. Many of the cases, the deaths that have been reported, there's been a delayed treatment of antibiotics when they had seen a doctor already. So this is worrying.
Dr. Lawrence, look, thank you very, very much, as always, for speaking sense and cutting through the noise when it comes to the latest Strep A outbreak. Also, on a slightly different note, I do like the fact that you've come dressed as Stormzy. Anyway, there we go. Right, OK, just a couple of things in the inbox very, very quickly relating to Harry and Meghan. We're going to be talking about them later on because their new Netflix trailer has just dropped. And more trailers in a caravan park, this lot, haven't they? But apparently, this, according to Stephen, they're just trying to cash in wherever they can. Shame on them, as Patricia's been on just to say, horrible Harry. Your views on all of this, gbviews at gbnews.uk. Do you think, as I do, they're trying to dismantle the bricks at Buckingham Palace one by one? Harry and Meghan have released another trailer for their Netflix documentary. They've gone heavy on racism. They appear shocked that the royal family has a hierarchy as well. Who'd have thunk it? You've got all that coming your way and much, much more, as well as we speak to a Labour veteran when it comes to Sir Keir Starmer and his radical new agenda for Britain. But first, it's your latest headlines.
Good afternoon, it's 3:34. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date. Parents are being urged to look out for Strep A symptoms amid rising infections caused by the bacteria. At least 6 children have died with an invasive form of the infection in recent months. More than 850 cases were reported in the week starting the 14th of November, compared to over 180 for the same period last year. Though Downing Street says the NHS is well prepared and there are no shortages of the antibiotics needed to treat the infection. Symptoms include a sore throat, headache and fever. The RMT is being urged to think again about staging rail strikes which threaten to bring travel chaos over Christmas. Number 10 says the current offer of an 8% pay rise over 2 years, as well as a guarantee of no compulsory redundancies before April 2024, is fair. That deal was rejected by the union, which says the deal won't protect its members and will lead to unsafe practices. Labour says it will look at abolishing the House of Lords if it wins the next general election, describing the current system as indefensible. Sir Keir Starmer set out his blueprint for a new Britain, promising the biggest ever transfer of power from Westminster to nations and regions if his party comes into power. Launching a report which was led by the former Prime Minister Gordon Brown, Sir Keir Starmer promised to overhaul the way the country's governed. Ukraine says 40% of the Kyiv region is without electricity after Russian missiles hit energy plants. Officials say it's the latest wave of airstrikes on the country, destroying homes in the south, cutting power in the north and killing at least 2 people. England forward Raheem Sterling has flown back to the UK after a burglary at his home. Surrey police say watches and jewellery were stolen, but confirmed his family weren't in the house at the time of the robbery. England manager Gareth Southgate was unable to say whether the footballer would return to Qatar for the game on Saturday. We're on your TV, online and DAB+ radio. It's GB News. Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2199 and €1.1603. The price of gold is £1,454 and 12 pence per ounce, and the FTSE 100 is at 7,582 points.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB+ radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere. Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. It's an action-packed show, this. Now, I just want to talk a little bit about Labour's plans for devolution, taking more power away from Westminster and giving it back to British nations and the English regions. You might think this sounds really dull. Well, it's not. Let's liven it up, because the party will also consider abolishing the House of Lords as it looks to position itself as the next party of government. Is this what the country is crying out for? Let's talk to the Labour MP for Huddersfield, Barry Shearman, who is standing down at the next election. Barry, thank you very much. The cynic in me would say that you don't believe in Keir Starmer's vision, otherwise you'd be standing again.
Well, no, the reason that I'm not standing is I've had a damn good run. I got elected in 1979, and people come up to me in the parliamentary party all the time now and say, my God, I wasn't even born then. And I've had a good run. I've really enjoyed being a member of parliament, serving my constituents and my country. I've really enjoyed it. But you know, I have quite a lot of knowledge and experience of what has been tried by former governments, and of course, I'm really quite cautious about big constitutional changes when what we're facing at the moment is a crisis in the economy.
Yes, well, a crisis in the economy, absolutely 100%. But I wanted to get your views on the House of Lords is by definition an institution, but it's a British institution as well. It's one of the great institutions of state. The royal family, as we're going to be talking about very shortly, has copped it, is copping it a lot at the minute. That institution potentially under threat. Is abolishing the House of Lords really a vote winner? It looks like, you know, New Britain, as Keir Starmer's calling it. Does he just want to smash Britain into the ground?
I'm not sure. It's a policy that, you know, you're going to have to go out and sell in the country. I'm not sure it will be that popular. And all governments coming, you know, tend to have, you know, hobby horses that they want. I remember when Tony Blair got in, we wasted so. Do you remember we wasted so much time debating fox hunting week after week? Talking about fox hunting more than children and children's children living in poverty. So getting the balance right, I'm all for reform, but let's get our priorities right.
Yes, I mean, those headlines wrote themselves, didn't they, after the relentless back and forth, the ping-pong. I mean, for Fox's sake, was probably a personal classic when it came to all of that. But let's just move on and talk about, they say New Britain, but the reality is that essentially Gordon Brown has supposedly drawn up Keir Starmer's plan for this, and there's even talk of David Miliband coming back. I mean, it's not really New Britain, is it? It's not really a new, for want of a better phrase, Labour Party. It's an old one.
I think it's a mixture of the old and the new. I very much admired and worked for the election of David Miliband at one stage. And also, we've got some really good, you know, wise people, like Tony Blair, still giving guidance and help in the background. But we've also got, I have to say, the brightest bunch of frontbenchers. You know, people like Wes Streeting and people like Rachel Reeves, Yvette Cooper. We've got a really good bunch of frontbench shadow ministers.
But reality, in terms of reality, I should say, yes, we have to. The finer points of this House of Lords reform remain to be seen. I mean, it's a story and also a non-story at the same time, because we don't really know the exact details of how it'll work. It is conditional on Labour winning the next general election. So I think it's more the phrase "abolish the House of Lords" that has caught the headlines. But I'm more concerned about the protection of the United Kingdom. And I think Keir Starmer has tried to give a bit more devolved power to other areas of the UK as a bid to try and stop referenda. But I don't really think that's going to work, is it? Because it was Tony Blair who gave them a whiff of their own power to begin with. And look where we are now. Sturgeon's gone mad for it.
Well, I don't want to get into the SNP and Scottish devolution, but I would say this, that what we're facing is a real crisis, and the big crisis, because anyone can talk about these issues, the great crisis that faces our country at the next election is how do we repair the damage of Brexit? How do we repair the damage that our GDP is now shrinking rather than growing? And how do we build real connections again with our great allies across the European Union and in the United States? Whereas at the moment, nobody really seems to care about what the UK says or does.
Right, I get what you're saying. We haven't got time for me to pick apart your arguments there on the Brexit situation, but I would argue that the vast majority of people want public health services that work, general public services that work, no to these strikes, and they want something sorted out in the Channel, sharpish, and when it comes to net migration. And to be fair, it's all very well and good to talk about...
We want an honest government, an efficient government that actually delivers for the people of the country.
But on this, Keir Starmer swerved... Yeah, I get this. But Keir Starmer is not answering any questions about that, is he? He's not supporting the strikes. He's not saying what he'd do to stop them. And he's definitely not got any solutions for what's going on in the Channel at all, has he? So is this just smoke and mirrors? Oh, I'll abolish the House of Lords and actually not deal with the issues that people care about?
It is a long way to the next general election, and much of this will be sorted. And, of course, Jim Callaghan once said to me, turkeys don't vote for Christmas, but we're not looking at an early election, are we?
Well, not yet, no. You're absolutely bob on. Thank you very much. I appreciated that. Always enjoy it. That's Barry Shearman there, who is the Labour MP for Huddersfield, standing down, sadly, at the next general election. Right, OK, we're moving on now, because a new trailer for Harry and Meghan's Netflix documentary, and by the way, this has kicked off in the inbox, and let's be honest, not all of those emails I can actually read out at any time of the day or night. But there we go. It's got a lot of you very hot under the collar, it must be said. Anyway, it's been revealed that the first episode will be viewable this Thursday. Harry talks about his pain and suffering, and it includes claims from the couple that those around them, that so-called hatred directed at Meghan, is about her race. Let's just watch a very, very short clip. We should warn you that there are flashing images in the footage coming up right now. It would be a shame if you all looked away.
There's a hierarchy of the family. You know, there's leaking, but there's also planting of stories.
There was a war against Meghan to suit other people's agendas.
It's about hatred. It's about race. It's a dirty game. The pain and suffering of women marrying into this institution, this feeding frenzy.
I realized they're never going to protect you.
I was terrified. I didn't want history to repeat itself. No one knows the full truth.
My heart bleeds. I think the nation's heart bleeds, doesn't it? How much money does it take to sell out your entire family? Joining me now is GB News' royal reporter Cameron Walker. Cameron, the anticipation is huge, the controversy is palpable, but the dates for these have been revealed, and one of them is actually when, supposedly anyway, nurses and NHS workers are going on strike on the 15th of December, which is a shame, because everyone who has an aneurysm when they watch that will not be able to get medical care. But just talk to me about this. Controversy is now raging, isn't it?
Well, very controversial, you're right. And on that point, the last 3 episodes are going to be airing on the 15th of December is actually the Princess of Wales's carol service at Westminster Abbey. So yet another overshadow for William and Kate. So that's the first thing to say. You're right, very controversial. The first thing to say is that Prince Harry claims that there is a hierarchy in the family. There's leaking, there's planting of stories, all suggesting that there was an agenda against Harry and Meghan when they were working members of the royal family. People within inside the institution colluding with the press to put out negative stories about them. That's the allegation. Of course, they've not been proven, and the palace would deny that, I would say. There is also, he talks about the pain and suffering of women marrying into the institution. You saw photographs there of Princess Diana being allegedly hounded by the press. I think it's Prince Harry making the comparison between Diana and his wife, Meghan.
I think he is, and that is, by the way, one of the big things, sorry to interrupt you, Cameron, but one of the big things that's got people going in my inbox where they think, actually, that's quite disgraceful because clearly, well, people are saying, is he trying to cash in a bit on his mother's death? Anyway, I won't drag you into that rabbit hole. But, yes, I mean, that's one element of it that seems strange, doesn't it?
It certainly does seem strange, but I think the interesting point is that he says no one knows the full truth. We know the full truth. The problem for Prince Harry is there's 2 sides to every story. And another problem is that the late Queen set a precedent following the Oprah interview in 2021 when Meghan claims an unnamed member of the royal family questions what colour Archie's skin would be when he was born. Harry accused his father of financially cutting him off, something which Clarence House denied. But because the Queen set that precedent of recollections may vary, it would not surprise me if there was a particularly damaging allegation on Thursday when the first 3 episodes come out that Buckingham Palace fights back.
Yeah, 100%. And I think on this point now, Buckingham Palace and the monarchy as a whole has usually anyway, a policy of, don't comment on these kind of things, let it all wash over. Essentially, some would argue dignity, being quietly dignified in the face of various different storms. Whereas I am wondering whether or not the public mood is shifting. And in modern times, maybe it is getting to a stage now where the public would quite like the royal family to hit back a bit. And on that sense, I wonder if Harry and Meghan have bitten off more than they can chew, because that royal family is a powerful beast. The mechanism behind it is a powerful beast if it decides to grind itself into gear.
Well, it's certainly a possibility, but the Mail on Sunday reported a source that claims that the King and Queen consorts are not worried about what Harry and Meghan are going to say in this series. They are wearied, which perhaps was reflecting the views of the public, that they are tired of what Harry and Meghan have to say, because they seem to have been making the same complaints for the last 18 months.
Yeah, well, and this is it as well. And he's got a book out, and goodness knows what else is taking place. We've had the Oprah interview. Supposedly, since the Oprah interview, they've not had too much interaction with the royal family. Obviously, there was the Queen's death and whatever went on around that. But in reality, there wasn't a huge amount of interaction. So people will be scratching their heads and thinking, what new stuff is there? And when it gets this far down the line, I think, hey, get over it, people. Just get over it. Move on with your life and stop carrying... It's like a jilted ex who's still banging on at you, after all this time. Just get over it. But also, as well, I think people thinking it's undeniable now that they are trying to use their sour grapes to actively damage the royal family.
I think it's a bit of a shame, because we saw, following the late Queen's death, when Harry and Meghan stayed in the United Kingdom, and they did that joint walkabout with William and Catherine outside Windsor to view the flowers, and there was huge public support for the Fab Four back together, as it was dubbed. Then just a few days ago, Harry did a surprise video for a charity which supports children whose parents have died in conflict. Again, a charitable cause which many would think is very admirable. But when they keep perhaps capitalising on their relationship with the royal family, I think that doesn't sit right with people. But from Harry and Meghan's perspective, of course, they no longer receive money from royal finances. They don't receive our money, as in taxpayers' money, sovereign grant. They don't receive money from Charles. So the only way they can perhaps make money is by signing these multi-million-dollar deals with Netflix, Spotify, his book in January, as you said. And what have they got to sell? What have they got to say other than...
It's sad, though, isn't it, in that respect, really, which is that you could be that desperate for that amount of money, which, let's be honest, they are from a kind of class of people, one would assume, where they're probably dead against billionaires, whilst they're doing their very best to try to become billionaires, off the back of airing their family's dirty laundry in public. It just doesn't sit well with me. But Cameron, thank you very much. You're going to be a busy man in the next few weeks, aren't you? Cameron Walker there, our royal correspondent. Nice to have you back in the country, by the way.
Thank you.
Back from Boston. Anyway, right, OK. Moving away from that, and don't worry, we'll be returning to this Harry and Meghan documentary. I just want to add, really, my own views on this, just very quickly, which is that I think Prince Harry could do with shutting up and going away, because it is starting to look really, really sad and desperate. And, forgive me, he's not the brains of Britain. He's absolutely not. And strong rumours about exactly who did his coursework at school, for example. And I would be amazed if he wins in a battle with our entire royal family. Anyway, moving away. Hundreds of troops are on standby to cover for striking workers as ministers prepare for a wave of industrial actions across public services in the run-up to Christmas. And I tell you one thing I was shocked by as well. A rather startling announcement today that workers from Shelter, the homelessness charity, they're going on strike. But more talks are expected this afternoon between Network Rail and the RMT, following the RMT's rejection of the latest offer from the train companies, and disputes in other industries rumble on. So 33,000 firefighters are being balloted on strike over pay. But what do people make of the ongoing disruption? Well, I thought I'd dig deep into the polls. Can I just have a little bit of a moment of clarity on this as far as one thing that I thought about all of this? Because I positioned myself very strongly when it came to things like the nurses' strike. And I've got to be honest with you, I was very angry about the idea that nurses would go on strike, mainly because I thought it's basically criminal if patients do suffer. However, I can understand why people feel very, very passionately about the nurses. And if I am being completely honest, I don't mind sharing this with the nation, perhaps my judgment on this was clouded a little bit by some of my own family's interactions with the NHS. It's fair to say not a lot of them extremely positive, but that's not a fair representation of the nation as a whole, is it? So I am kind of rowing back on this, and I think, not entirely, but a little bit. And I think it comes as I've seen some recent YouGov polls, which is that Brits are perhaps more split than I gave us credit for, actually, on whether trade unions will have a positive or negative role in Britain, and whether or not, as well, people actually support actively the strikes, and that includes a poll that came out, but apparently 54% of you are in favour of the nurses' strike, and only around 20% of you are dead against it. So, yes, perhaps I should reconsider my views on this slightly, but I'm delighted to welcome to my show a couple of GB News viewers. Joining me is Carol Fordham from Cambridge and Alan McNeely from Grimsby. Coral, I've misnamed you. Apologies, Coral. There you go. Anyway, I wanted to get the views of the people on this because I was doing a lot of thinking over the weekend, which is always dangerous. But I'm starting to wonder whether or not I've positioned myself correctly over these strikes. Basically, everyone's going on strike. Which ones do you have the most sympathy for, Coral?
Well, I think anyone that isn't happy with their pay and conditions, yes, I feel sympathy for. But nurses, for example, the mess that we're in, the NHS are in, is they can't strike. We have got to come to some sort of agreement or compromise or something. I mean, who is actually talking to them? Has the ministers, have they sat down with the unions? How far have they got? What have they offered them? The government has left us in such a mess, and the backlog, people are dying and they shouldn't be. So the last thing we need is them going on strike. And it's the same with all strikes, really. It shouldn't get to the point where they feel they have to strike.
Well, and that's kind of a big point, Coral, and I'll throw this one over to Alan now, Alan in Grimsby, because I think the tide, this is one thing that I noticed over the weekend, that the tide was turning. As we are staring down the barrel of massive widespread strike action, I sense that some elements of public opinion is now shifting towards the government, saying, how have you let this happen? Your views?
I would agree with you, the other lady on the show, that everyone will have sympathy for the nurses. I don't believe that they should be striking, but I can understand why they might feel that they need to strike. On the broader spectrum of strikes, and particularly with the RMT, I've got no sympathy with them whatsoever, because the drivers certainly are extremely well paid, and every year they hold the country to ransom, particularly the tube drivers. So yes, there should be increases for those lower paid within the rail sector, the porters and the cleaners and people like that. But I've got no sympathy for Mick Lynch, who I think is just an outright communist. People are going to be unhappy, but they've got to come to a reality of what can the country afford, and
well, this is it.
Accept that and not accept it.
And just quickly on this now, because more than any tweet I've ever put out, Coral, I absolutely copped it. When I said that I felt as though some nurses striking at Children's Hospital were potentially utilising the health of sick children for leverage when it came to their pay. I got absolutely slated for that. And it made me think, Coral, do you think that people self-censor what they actually think? Because both of you think a lot of respect for nurses, but actually I don't think it's right they strike. But do you think a lot of people just blindly go, I better say that I'm behind a nurses' strike, otherwise people think I'm evil, Coral?
I think there's a possibility of that. But I think, and you touched on it earlier, that the government and the Bank of England, we don't seem to be talking about them. The Bank of England, actually, their job, and I looked it up, is to keep the cost of living stable so that our money keeps purchasing power. Now, nobody is talking about that. And who was the Chancellor and the Bank of England governor watching inflation going up? We didn't do anything about interest rates. So nobody's money is going as far as it ought to be, in fairness. And if you work for a private company, you'd have to just find another job, wouldn't you? You couldn't just say,
you would
have
to find another job. Exactly. Well, look, both of you, thank you. And Alan especially, I'm sorry to not be able to come back to you. I'm getting shouted at now because I always run over my times. I'm notorious for being terrible when it comes to keeping time. So apologies, but I would love to have you both back on. And thank you so much for tuning into GB News. We do really, really love the fact that we can get our viewers on and people who talk such sense. Thank you very much. Coral Fordham there, who is from Cambridge, and Aaron McNeely from Grimsby. You love to see it. We are the People's Channel, and there we're two people. Right, OK, coming up, I'm delighted to say that we're going to be discussing all of the massive, massive issues here for you. We don't shy away from anything. We've got the director of the Northern Powerhouse. He's going to give his response to Labour's plans to give more power to the regions. But I am also going to be talking a lot about the shocking new immigration figures. Did you know that we now have an open-door border policy when it comes to Afghanistan, Syria and Eritrea? They're being waved through to the tune of 98% of those asylum seekers. They tried to keep this quiet. 98% of them with stripped-back security checks. How safe does that make you feel? All of that coming your way and much, much more very shortly after headlines.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Welcome back, everybody. You're with me, Patrick Christys, right here on GB News. A packed hour ahead of you. I'm asking, should illegal migrants be barred from ever settling in the UK in an effort to crack down on the small boats crisis? It turns out as well, we've got a shocking open border system with Afghanistan, Syria and Eritrea. 98% of people who wanted to claim asylum from those countries have just been waved through with minimal security checks. Who'd thunk it, hey? Have GPs been prescribing antibiotics too slowly to treat Strep A? Plus, does the new Netflix trailer for Meghan and Harry's documentary exploit Princess Diana's death in order for them to cash in? Before that, it's your latest headlines.
Thank you, Patrick. Good afternoon. 3 minutes past 4. I'm Tatiana Sanchez in the GB Newsroom. Parents are being urged to look out for Strep A symptoms after the deaths of at least 6 children in the UK over recent weeks. Downing Street says the NHS is well prepared and there are no shortages of the antibiotics needed to treat the infection. More than 850 cases were reported in the week starting the 14th of November, compared to over 180 for the same period last year. Dr. Chris Smith says Strep A can easily be treated if the symptoms are caught early.
If you've got a bright red flushed appearance on your cheeks, that could be that you've got scarlet fever. This is one sign that the infection is becoming more significant, and it could then become an invasive infection. If a person doesn't get better with the normal trajectory of a cold, they've got those rash signs, they're also showing other signs of deterioration, then you should definitely seek a second opinion from your GP. And the good news is that if caught early, these strep infections respond reliably and reassuringly to cheap and cheerful, very safe antibiotics like amoxicillin.
The RMT is being urged to think again about staging rail strikes, which threaten to bring travel chaos over Christmas. Number 10 says the current offer of an 8% pay rise over 2 years, as well as a guarantee of no compulsory redundancies before April 2024, is fair. It was rejected by the union, which says the deal won't protect its members and will lead to unsafe practices. Education Secretary Gillian Keegan says the offer should have been put to members.
Well, the government has facilitated the conversations between the unions and the rail companies, and it is disappointing that the RMT union have rejected a new and improved offer that was being worked on over the weekend by the rail companies. I believe they've rejected it, not put that to their members. But this is disappointing because we would expect those talks to continue and for those offers to be put to members.
Labour says it will look at abolishing the House of Lords if it wins the next general election. Sir Keir Starmer set out his blueprint for a new Britain during a speech in Leeds, promising the biggest ever transfer of power from Westminster to nations and regions if his party comes into power. Launching a report which was led by former Prime Minister Gordon Brown, he vowed to overhaul the way the country's governed.
This broken model has held back our politics and held back our economy. And I'm determined we unbind ourselves and free our potential. Britain is one of the most centralised systems in Europe, and the centre has not delivered. Now, I don't want it to fall apart. I want us to build something new.
Weather warnings have been issued for the UK, with temperatures set to severely drop this week. A cold weather alert has been issued for England, with severe conditions forecast from 6 p.m. Wednesday through to next Monday. A yellow national severe weather warning for snow has also been issued for northern Scotland, with temperatures expected to fall to as low as -10 overnight. Healthcare services are urging people to protect vulnerable and high-risk groups. England forward Raheem Sterling has flown back to the UK from Qatar after his home was broken into. Surrey police says watches and jewellery were stolen, but confirmed the Chelsea winger's family weren't in the house at the time of the robbery. Manager Gareth Southgate says family is the most important thing and couldn't say whether he'll return to play in the World Cup quarter-final this weekend. Meanwhile, England is preparing to take on reigning champions France on Saturday. Bukayo Saka scored against Senegal last night in the 3-0 victory. He says England have nothing to fear in their upcoming clash.
There's no doubt, the quality we have in our team. We're blessed with an amazing front line with so much quality attacking players, and when you get selected in that lineup, it shows how much confidence and trust the coach puts in you, so it gives you that extra confidence to go out there and shine, and last night you were able to do that.
Prince Harry has spoken about the pain and suffering of women marrying into the royal family, calling it an institution. The latest allegation was made in a Netflix docuseries that airs this week.
There's a hierarchy of the family. There's leaking, but there's also planting of stories.
There was a war against Meghan to suit other people's agendas.
It's about hatred. It's about race. It's a dirty game. The pain and suffering of women marrying into this institution, this feeding frenzy.
I realized they're never going to protect you.
I was terrified. I didn't want history to repeat itself.
This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Patrick.
Well, Well, there is an ongoing public debate about how we tackle the migrant crisis, and a new tough-talking report with a foreword from the Home Secretary herself has been released today. But is all as it seems? Are you, like me, a little bit sick of hot air? In it, Suella Braverman says that she'll do whatever it takes to solve the problem. Yeah, OK, fine. How about doing it, then? Here are some of the things that the report recommends to deal with the influx of small boats crossing the Channel. I'll whiz you through these before we talk about, frankly, some pretty shocking stats that have dropped since this report came out. They want to introduce ID cards. Now, Suella Braverman is, as far as we're aware, not in favour of that. They want to stop those who enter the country illegally from settling in the United Kingdom, striking new deals for countries other than Rwanda to detain migrants offshore. It also calls for changes to human rights laws and for Britain to withdraw from the European Convention of Human Rights. Well, these are things that people have been talking about for a very, very long time. And whilst the report itself might be new, people would be forgiven for saying that the ideas are not. And what's changed? Well, there's been a mixed reception to the report, particularly that the proposals that no migrant who arrives in the UK illegally would ever be allowed to settle in the country. That apparently has caused controversy. I'll tell you what else has caused controversy. We raised it earlier on. I'll just refresh your memories on this. A council has hit back after being given 15 hours' notice that they had to house 80 asylum seekers in their third migrant hotel in the area. They already house 221. It's a seaside town. It's around the Morecambe and Lancaster area, and they obviously rely on a lot of tourism domestically. Well, that has been shattered. It's also been emerged that there's a two-tier system. So it's predicted that we're going to have 50,000 people coming across the Channel by the end of the year. Of those, 33,000 of them, allegedly, are from Afghanistan, Syria, Eritrea, Sudan and Iran. OK? Guess how many of the Afghans, the Syrians and the Eritreans have just been granted asylum, fast-tracked asylum? 98%. 98%. And Sudan, 87%. Iran, 82%. It's also coming as, of course, we are not really deporting that many people back to Albania on the grounds of the modern slavery legal loophole. Well, despite writing a foreword, the Home Secretary says that she doesn't agree with all of the recommendations in today's report. Joining me now is a former Home Office Special Advisor, Claire Pearsall, who's now a Conservative councillor in Kent, which is bang at the front line of the migrant crisis as small boats land along the coastline. Look, the proposals themselves, I'm quite reluctant to actually really talk about in a sense, because we've heard all of this before, haven't we, really? I'm more inclined to reveal the quite shocking stats about the fact that we seem to be waving people from Afghanistan, Syria and Eritrea through with reduced security checks. Were you aware of that?
I wasn't aware of that until you brought it up. And I think it's only right that we do look at rehoming people from Afghanistan, given the situation over there, especially when it comes to women. I would rather see some kind of route for women and children to be able to live safely. But as for reduced security checks, I think that that is not in the national interest. It certainly shouldn't happen. And I would like to see some explanation from the Home Office as to why that is actually going ahead. Surely you cannot just allow people to come into your country. You don't know their background. You don't know what they've been involved in. That's just common sense tells you that security checks are absolutely important and they need to happen. So I think this is some really serious stuff that the Home Office has to answer.
Yeah, indeed. And also, one of the statements made by a Lancaster council, the head of housing in Lancaster, which is one of the areas that has been swamped, really, when it comes to the asylum seeker crisis there in terms of their hotels. There was a really interesting line in it which said, and I'm glad that someone's come out and said this, because I think people have been sitting on their hands when it comes to the cold, hard reality. They are now concerned that unless something is done, that conflict is inevitable. And they were saying that conflict is inevitable between local residents and people staying in these hotels. And that can be for a variety of different reasons. But we shouldn't shy away from the fact that a lot of people think that this is just a reality. Your views on whether or not, if we continue along this road, there will be conflict between, quotes, unquotes, the indigenous population and these asylum seekers?
I think it's inevitable that there will be clashes. And as you say, it's for a number of reasons. And at the moment, people are working through a cost of living crisis. The weather is about to get an awful lot worse. People are finding things tough. And if they are seeing people being housed in hotels, which would normally be for the hospitality industry, those people may have lost their jobs in that area. So they're going to be rightly angry about it. But I also think it's going to be anger at the fact that that there is no forward planning as to what happens next. If you knew that this was only for a 2-3 week period, you would probably be able to get your head around it and work with the community involved. But to come in last minute and say, well, they're here and we're just going to put them there because we don't know what else to do, you can understand that communities are going to be rightly angry, and you can see that clashes are going to occur. It's not necessarily against the migrants. I believe it's against the whole principle and what's happening to the area.
Well, it's against the system, and actually it's impossible for local councils to now really go into bat for the government, even in Tory areas. I mean, even in the likes of the Royal Borough of Windsor and Maidenhead, for example, where they are staunchly Tory and would obviously back the Conservative government under normal circumstances, but they're having these hotels landed on them. And now I'm reading reports in the Times that Rishi Sunak has got his own teams, reportedly, got his own teams in the Home Office, that Suella Braverman is not particularly pro some kind of two-tier system, so people being fast-tracked, i.e. like the Afghanistans, the Syrians and the Eritreans, based on nationality alone, and something that she's expressed serious concern about in the past. And people may remember the real reason why she actually stepped down from one of Liz Truss's things. Are we about to witness a second resignation from Suella Braverman? Because at the minute, the whole system's looking rudderless. We don't know who's in charge.
Well, we don't, and I've long called for an immigration department to be set up separately from the Home Office, because I think that this issue is just too enormous for one person. And as we have seen, the Home Secretary currently doesn't have a plan of how to deal with it, and seemingly has no will to deal with it. It's an awful lot of tinkering around the edges. How about we just make this one department of its own, have one person solely responsible, like other countries do. They have interior ministries. And then we can set out a sensible plan for what we do with our borders and who comes in.
Yeah, and I think in many ways this is just proof of what a lot of people have been banging their heads against the desks and the walls saying, which is that we've got a quote-unquote new report here, the Centre for Policy Studies, written by Nick Timothy. Now, there's nothing in that I particularly massively disagree with. The ID cards thing maybe I'm a little bit squiffy about, becoming less squiffy about as it emerges that people are apparently rampaging across the British countryside at will. But you've got the idea that we should pull out the ECHR, you've got the idea now that we should basically be deporting people to Rwanda or other countries, either, i.e. offshore processing. But this is stuff that we've been talking about for years. And the idea that this is a new report now, I think a lot of people find quite startling. We've not moved forward, have we? We are all out of ideas, or anyway, enacting those ideas. Claire, thank you very much. As you know, I could talk to you all day on this stuff, but I think I'm going to have an aneurysm if I talk about it for much longer. Claire Pearsall there, who's now a Conservative councillor in Kent, on the front line of that migrant crisis, as well, and a friend of the channel, it's fair to say, for want of a better phrase, considering we're talking about what's going on in the channel. But Sir Keir Starmer has given us a flavour of what the Labour government would mean for all four nations of the UK, as he's vowed to unbind Britain from the centre. And that basically meaning that he's going to spread a little bit of power out away from Westminster. He says that the centralisation of powers is not delivered. The plans involve more power being devolved to nations and regions, and Labour will consider abolishing the House of Lords. Some would argue that in true Keir Starmer fashion, it was very, very short on detail, but there we go, that will just be the cynic in me. He's currently speaking alongside Gordon Brown in Edinburgh, where they are giving more detail on all of this, not before time. I believe we can go to that, can we? Oh, no, we're not going to it just yet. We're not going there just yet. OK, fair enough. In a matter of moments, we might be. Let's get some reaction from this from Henry Murrison, who is director of the Northern Powerhouse Partnership. Henry, you join me now, which, frankly, you've saved us from a live interaction of Keir Starmer, so the nation is grateful. Henry, what do you make of this? Is there actually anything to really get stuck into? He's spoken about considering abolishing the House of Lords, dishing out a little bit more power to these devolved areas, but is there any substance?
I think there is quite a lot of substance, to be honest. And I think one of the challenges with kind of Boris Johnson's boosterism was in the end it equated to often not much more than warm words. So I think the benefit of something like this, which is more focused on giving powers to mayors to create more fundamental shift of funding and powers out of the centre, will do a lot more than the kind of beauty pageant funding competitions that the now new Prime Minister saw as Chancellor. Because bluntly, paying for a new swimming pool in Newcastle is not going to make people in the North East more prosperous, but actually improving the skills system, improving local transport, will make a significant difference.
Yeah, do the local areas actually want it? Because as far as I can tell, one of Nicola Sturgeon's big things is that she can, at least as it stands, point down at Westminster and say they're messing it up for us, despite the fact that, as far as I can see, pretty much everything she's in control of is knackered. Then you've got the Welsh government. I mean, the Welsh NHS is not in great shape. It's the old argument, isn't it, that this government used to do to the EU and go, oh, you know, it's all their fault, but then you give them the power and they mess it up. So would the devolved nations actually want to take more power? Because with more power comes more responsibility.
I think people do want more responsibility, and I think your characterisation of Welsh circumstances, I think, is a bit different, actually, to the Scottish policy debate. I think, actually, Mark Drakeford often does try and take responsibility for things and has often had a sort of a more sensible approach, particularly, I mean, during some of the challenges of the last years. I think the Welsh government has been quite able to sometimes respond better than probably Westminster. In the case of the Northern Mayors, we don't have anywhere near the powers that the Scottish government do, despite the fact that where I'm sitting here in Yorkshire is the size of Scotland, and the north of England is 15 million people. So I don't think it's unreasonable that we should be allowed to have a few more of the responsibilities that would enable us to drive our economy. And I think, as a station devoted to hearing the voices around the country, I'm sure you've heard loud and clear that actually many people do want Westminster to take a little bit less of a over-interest in the detail of things and actually allow places to do this for themselves.
No, look, I'm from the north of England as well myself, and I think especially when you look around Yorkshire, you know, I'm not from the Yorkshire area, but of course, as we all know, it is God's own county, and some would argue that the calls for that to run itself are relatively valid. One of my concerns would be, you spoke a lot about regional mayors, but what's the kind of turnout like at a mayoral election? Because actually, are people not voting for what's going on in Westminster? And then with the best will in the world, I mean, you end up with Andy Burnham in charge of more. I mean, is that actually democratic?
Well, I mean, Andy Burnham got an overwhelming result. Do you mean a much bigger majority the second time than the first time? But actually, so did Ben Houchen in the Tees Valley. What I would say is, what's notable is that the mayors that stood the second time ended up with much bigger mandates than the average MP up against. Do you mean there aren't many of them that are getting 60, 70% of the vote? Does that make sense in their particular constituency? So I would argue that our mayors are a lot closer to real people.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fair enough argument.
And are a lot more able to do something. The problem with electing an MP is they don't get much power over the place they represent. They get one say along with everyone else, don't they? And that doesn't mean they can actually change anything in their own area.
Well, OK, all right, look, thank you very, very much. It's been great to chat to you. I would like to chat to you again very shortly about this. The reception wasn't perfectly ideal there, but I would love to talk to you again, Henry. A fascinating conversation. And clearly a chap who knows his onions when it comes to everything devolution, and indeed, well, as you would expect for the director of the Northern Powerhouse Partnership, Henry Morrison there. Right, you are with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. And coming up, as doctors are urged to promptly prescribe antibiotics for scarlet fever, we will ask a GP what the signs of Strep A are and what has indeed caused this latest outbreak. And do the British public actually support strike action? I hate to say this, I'm starting to row back a little bit. No, I don't support the strikes, and I'm becoming a little bit more sensitive to the needs of people who frankly are now skint. I will ask the Unite regional officer about all of this shortly. But before that, and also we're talking Harry and Meghan. GBViews at gbnews.uk. I am desperate to go to that inbox shortly because there's some dynamite in there when it comes to those whinge and ginge. Anyway, I'll see you after the weather.
Hello again, Aidan McGibbon here from the Met Office. It's fairly cloudy out there. There are some showers about, and it's also feeling cold. But colder air is on the way than this during the next few days. At the moment, we've got a chilly easterly breeze. That will be, moved out of the way by this increasingly cold northerly wind during the next couple of days, which will bring some snow showers to places. Well, for the time being, any showers out there are mostly rain, and they're mostly affecting eastern parts of the country. One or two making their way into the Midlands, Wales, Northern Ireland, some southern counties of England as we end the day. But the showers in the south will move away, the showers inland will tend to ease, and the showers across the north will pick up pace, especially for northern Scotland as the northerly winds arrive. But for most, we'll have enough cloud, enough of a breeze to prevent a widespread frost as we begin Tuesday. Just a touch of frost for North Wales, the Midlands, parts of Northern Ireland, for example, because of the clearer spells here. And increasingly, the cloud will break up. So we're going to swap the cloudy easterly for a much clearer, crisper northerly during Tuesday. Plenty of sunshine in the south and the west. Further areas of cloud and showers into the north and the east in particular, and an increasingly cold northerly wind. So mid-single figures for many, but feeling colder in that wind. And the wind's going to drag freezing air from the Arctic. So for northern Scotland on Tuesday night, the snow level coming down, and it looks like by the end of the night, snow falling at all levels for the north of Scotland. And there'll be a widespread frost elsewhere, with clear spells more likely across western parts of the country, and even in towns and cities, -2 or -3 Celsius. In the countryside, lower than that. Nevertheless, a bright start to the day for many. Some areas of cloud in the east and the north, along with some showers. Mostly these are rain and hill snow showers, but for northern Scotland, the snow building up at lower levels, 2 to 5 centimetres. Over hills, 5 to 10 centimetres, could cause some issues.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by 2 of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton Tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel. Yes, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Loads to come, but the UK Health Security Agency has urged GPs to treat cases of scarlet fever promptly with antibiotics because of fears over the spread of Strep A. Now, 6 children have died, 7 I believe it is actually now, after contracting the bacterial infection, which can cause scarlet fever. Levels of the disease are higher than expected for this time of year, and the government said this afternoon it can fully understand that parents are concerned by rising Strep A cases, but has stressed the NHS is well prepared for these situations, which frankly would make a change, wouldn't it? It's urging parents to be on the lookout for the symptoms, which we will run through rather helpfully for you in a matter of moments. The outbreak was raised in an urgent question in the House of Lords, which Keir Starmer might abolish earlier today.
My Lords, I beg leave to ask a question of which I've given private notice. The question is as follows. To ask His Majesty's Government what assessment they have made of their guidance to doctors and to parents in light of the increase in Strep A, eye gas and scarlet fever cases.
The UK Health Security Agency has declared a national standard incident to coordinate the public health response. They are working with schools and GPs where there are outbreaks to provide information on scarlet fever and eye gas. A rapid surveillance report and communications to the health system has been published to ensure heightened awareness amongst frontline clinicians. We are also putting out key messages for parents to understand the trigger points for urgent referrals of children with more serious cases.
Grief, he could have brought a tear to a glass eye, that fella, couldn't he? Came dressed as a page boy as well, which was nice of him. Anyway, joining me now is David Denning, Professor of Infectious Diseases at Manchester University. David, let's do our public health duty first and point out what some of the symptoms are and what people can look out for and how we can treat Strep A.
So Group A strep typically causes tonsillitis, and that's obviously very uncomfortable and bad news for many people who get it, and it's very common. It can also cause scarlet fever, which with a mild sore throat, fever, and a rash, a sort of bumpy, faint rash on the trunk, which is also typical, often with a bright red tongue and a paleness around the lips and the area of the mouth. What's different about this outbreak, and it occurs every year in certain senses that these cases occur, not necessarily an outbreak, but certain cases occur, is sepsis or toxic shock syndrome due to streptococcus. And this is a much more serious disease, as we've learned from these poor children who've died. And the typical symptoms of that are vomiting. About 2/3 of the children get vomiting. About half of them have a rash, a generalized rash. Some of them have bright red eyes and a sense that their conjunctiva is red. You get diarrhea in about 40% of patients. Almost all of them have a high fever, and sometimes they have chills, but not always. And then a smaller proportion, 40%, are not quite with it and a bit confused or have difficulty articulating themselves or are semi-conscious, and diarrhea occurs in some of these children as well. So it's a broad spectrum of illness. There isn't a single thing that is there that you can absolutely nail and say, right, that's definitively a Group A strep infection.
Just quickly again, how do people actually contract it? How is it spread?
Close contact, it's a common mouth organism, so it goes from person to person. It doesn't travel in the air, but if people cough or they share saliva or they share toys and other things, that's how it
So presumably that's why it's a lot more common amongst children, because they're milling around in nurseries. So are we ignoring a slight elephant in the room here, which is that, dare I say, it's some of the reason why some of the strep cases have not been picked up early is because, as one GP said to me earlier on, people are struggling to get a GP appointment at the moment, and also as well the lockdown effects on a lack of mixing when it comes to children?
I think those are both reasonable speculations, but I can't really be definitive or comment on them in any force. Certainly immunity over time is important with Group A strep, otherwise adults will be getting this infection too. And so that presupposes that a lack of mixing in childhood, in schools, etc., meant that there's been less strep circulating, and therefore more children are more susceptible to it. And we also know that one of the reasons why people get this toxic shock syndrome associated with strep is because they haven't got antibodies to strep. And so we treat it actually with antibody therapy to try and complex the toxin that causes the severe disease. So you may well be right that there has been less strep circulating and therefore more susceptible people about.
All right, look, thank you very much again for kind of cutting through the noise when it comes to Strep A. David Denning there, Professor of Infectious Diseases at Manchester University. I just want to delve into the world of my inbox before I throw over to the news very quickly. One of our big topics of the day, we've been leading with it each hour, is shocking figures when it comes to what's been going on in the Channel. Did you know that we now have essentially an open border policy with Afghan, Syrian and Eritrean, I would argue as well, basically Sudanese and Iranian asylum seekers as well. 98% of Afghan, Syrians and Eritreans are just being waved through and granted asylum in this country when they come across the Channel with stripped back security checks. How does that make you feel? Peter's up in arms. He says if hotels are being used to accommodate illegal immigrants, not only are people losing their jobs in that industry, not only is tourism suffering, but there will be knock-on effects to shopkeepers whose former tourist companies, customers I should say, will not be visiting shops, tea rooms, restaurants. Peter, absolutely spot on. I'm going to be linking to this throughout the course of the show. Oh yes, and the latest Harry and Meghan trailer just dropped. In my view, they're looking to dismantle the royal family one little piece at a time, and frankly they should get over themselves. The new trailer for that Netflix documentary has dropped. They've gone big on racism. They appear shocked that the royal family has a hierarchy. I mean, I did not think Prince Harry was that thick that he didn't realise that the royal family has a hierarchy. I mean, good grief. But first, it's your latest news headlines.
Good afternoon, it's 4:34. This is the latest from the GB Newsroom. Parents are being urged to look out for Strep A symptoms after the deaths of at least 6 children in the UK over recent weeks. Downing Street says the NHS is well prepared and there are no shortages of the antibiotics needed to treat the infection. More than 850 cases were reported in the week starting the 14th of November, compared to over 180 for the same period last year. Dr. Chris Smith says Strep A can be easily treated if the symptoms are caught early. The RMT is being urged to think again about staging rail strikes which threaten to bring travel chaos over Christmas. Number 10 says the current offer of an 8% pay rise over 2 years, as well as a guarantee of no compulsory redundancies before April 2024, is fair. It was rejected by the union, which says the deal won't protect its members and will lead to unsafe practices. Labour says it will look at abolishing the House of Lords if it wins the next general election, describing the current system as indefensible. Sir Keir Starmer has set out his blueprint for a new Britain, promising the biggest ever transfer of power from Westminster to nations and regions if his party comes into power. And Downing Street says it's confident the UK has sufficient energy supplies ahead of temperatures severely set to drop this week. A cold weather alert has been issued for England with severe conditions forecast from 6 p.m. Wednesday to next Monday. A yellow warning for snow has also been issued for northern Scotland, with temperatures expected to fall to as low as -10 overnight. TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Stay with us. Patrick's back in just a moment.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents. Whether you're with us on TV, radio or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back, wonderful people. Right now, in a few seconds, I will be discussing the new trailer for the Harry and Meghan's documentary and whether there's now more support for striking workers. But loads of you have been getting in touch with your thoughts on the migrant situation. And, well, there was a report published today from the Centre for Policy Studies which basically said, oh, OK, we've got some bright ideas for this. We've got some bright ideas about how to deal with it. And then proceeded, as far as I could tell anyway, to publish the exact same things that people have been talking about for years, such as getting us out of the ECHR, getting people on planes to Rwanda, making sure that they never step foot in the UK if they come here illegally, potentially introducing ID cards, all of that usual guff. So Suella Braverman basically put her name to at least a bit of it at the start. But the problem is now, on exactly the same day, rather unfortunately for the publishers of that report, if you ask me, it's emerged that a region in Lancaster anyway, and around the Morecambe area, was given 15 hours notice when it came to having to house 80 asylum seekers in their third migrant hotel. The local MP, actually, told me live here on GB News he was given just 5 hours' notice, and when he asked what was going on, he wasn't really given an answer. Also, get a load of this. Because we are so overwhelmed with the backlog of people coming over here in small boats, an estimated 50,000 of them due to arrive by the end of this year, we are now waving people through. We have reduced the amount of security checks that we've got in place, specifically for people from Afghanistan, Syria, Eritrea and Sudan and Iran. So 98% of people who've claimed to be from Afghanistan, Syria and Eritrea have been allowed and granted asylum in the United Kingdom. I'm not quite sure how that makes you feel, but Susan's been on. Susan says, in Barrow-in-Furness, we have 2 migrant hotels that overlook a secure site building nuclear submarines. How is that not a security risk? To be fair, I absolutely take your point and I'm on your side with this, Susan. But if an asylum seeker comes over the channel and knows how to man a nuclear submarine, we've got bigger problems. Anyway, Maurice says, what a name. Maurice says, surely requisition of property puts us on a wartime footing. And this is part and parcel of it. The issue is, though, it's not really requisition, because what they're doing is they're picking areas where, let's be honest, the hotel trade took an absolute kicking during the coronavirus pandemic with lockdown. So they're on their knees. Seaside towns like Morecambe, like Blackpool and all these places, they've taken a kicking for years on account of cheap travel abroad. I mean, a lot of people now are going to Alicante and not Morecambe, bless it. And so all these hotels and boarding houses are just being offered, to quote the mafia, it's an offer they can't refuse, isn't it, from the Home Office? And they're just saying, well, yeah, all right, fine. But local councils are not being consulted about all of this stuff. And so you end up, in the case of Morecambe and Lonsdale and Lancaster, with 3 migrant hotels. And the reports, finally, someone's come out and said this, that conflict is inevitable. Now, that doesn't make the locals racist. No, what it does is, as we're in the middle of a cost of living crisis, they're seeing hotels being taken up by asylum seekers, many of them, it would appear, being weighed through with minimal security efforts, staying for a lot longer than the alleged 3 weeks that people are doing. Council houses then being used to house some of these people. Lower rental sector properties being used to house them as well. On top of all of that, the taxpayer funding it all, and it just builds conflict, doesn't it? Craig says it's an absolute disgrace that the Tories are still talking about getting to grips with illegal immigration. The new proposals in this report, even if they wish to implement them, will have to go through all the stages of Parliament and will take many months to become law. It's all far, far too late. Well, this is the fact, isn't it? I believe it was Steve, or no, it was Craig who got in touch to say that. Craig, it's not new proposals, is it? It's the same stuff over and over again. And I think people are sick and tired now of hearing the Home Secretaries, various different Home Secretaries, talking tough. And one thing that I think is really interesting is that Suella Braverman, and this slipped through the net a little bit, I'll just leave you with this one, guys, before we move on. Suella Braverman has come out and said that she is against having a 2-tier asylum system. So she's against the idea that just because someone comes from a particular country, like Afghanistan, that they are fast-tracked through the asylum process. Many people would argue or raise serious concerns that countries like Afghanistan, Syria, for example, are not countries that traditionally wish us well. In fact, we know that that's not the case, isn't it? And one would argue that maybe those are countries where we should be increasing our security checks of people coming over here, not waving them through. Well, if reports are true that Suella Braverman is dead against this, dead against the idea that we're waving through in all but name people from Afghanistan and Syria, but that the Prime Minister is essentially making her do it by undermining her at the Home Office, how long is it before Suella Braverman resigns? Anyway, there you go. GBViews at gbnews.uk. Keep those views coming in. It has kicked off. It's also kicked off, of course, about Meghan and Harry's new documentary for Netflix. The trailers have dropped. My big takeaway from that is that apparently it starts on the 8th of December and then the rest of the videos will be out on the 15th of December. My big problem with that is the 15th of December is supposed to coincide with the nurses' strike. So when everyone has a massive catastrophic aneurysm at their sickening behaviour in this documentary, who's going to treat them? But it's almost like we planned it, because we're going to talk about strikes now. More crisis talks are taking place this afternoon to avert rail strikes that could cause travel chaos over Christmas after the RMT union rejected the latest pay offer. Number 10 says the current offer of an 8% pay rise over 2 years, as well as a guarantee of no compulsory redundancies before April 2024, is fair. But the rail union said the deal wouldn't protect its members and would lead to unsafe practices. I believe that GB News' West Midlands reporter Jack Carson joins me now from Birmingham. He's been out finding out what the public make of this. Yes, Jack, you're all right. Hard for me to tell where you are there exactly. Somewhere in Birmingham. It's looking rather vibrant anyway, in terms of the lighting at least. What do the public think of these rail strikes?
Well, like you said, Patrick, the RMT and Mick Lynch rejected this 8% pay offer this morning, and it does look like these strikes are going to go ahead. Like you said, crisis talks holding on right now. But when it comes to strikes, Birmingham's always really been a bit of a mixed bag of support and opposition to the strikes. People saying they always understand why the strikes are going ahead, but always also commenting on how the disruption and how much disruption it causes to them. I've been out on the street today, and this is what a few people had to say.
Being selfish, I do like to come to Birmingham at Christmas, so it's not great for the public getting in and out of Birmingham. It's not ideal, really. It's not good.
I support them. I think they need more. They need to be paid more. It's not fair.
The railway strike, it's like all the other strikes that are coming up. They need to make people listen, and the only way they'll do it is to stop working. So whether we like it or not, it's got to happen.
And I understand, yeah, they don't get paid enough money for how hard they work. But from my point of view, it's annoying. But I understand from their point of view, it's probably annoying as well.
I suppose people need better pay and better working conditions, and that's the way to try and draw people's attention to it. So, yeah, I mean, if you don't support them, you're against people. I think this happens in so many professions. The public so easily are against people, and yeah, I think we should support them.
So that's what people on the street here in Birmingham have been saying today. Revenue for the railway companies is down 20%, and so the rail delivery group are saying that they're trying to offer the best offer they can in challenging times. But it does look like if an agreement can't be made, that we are going to have mass disruption on the railways for the next week, over Christmas, into the new year. New year, more strikes, Patrick.
Yeah, indeed, Jack, thank you very, very much. Well, shortly I'll be speaking to the Unite Union representative, who was supposed to have on a little bit earlier. I'm assured he hasn't gone on strike. He will indeed turn up shortly. But first, the online safety bill, the government's flagship internet regulation, has been back in Parliament today after a 5-month delay. Now, I know a lot of you might be wondering why we should care about this. It's all to do with free speech and stuff like that. Anyway, among those who've gathered in Westminster for the occasion are families who believe social media contributed in some way to their children's deaths. Very much two sides to this debate. Some people saying we need more free speech, other people saying we need regulation to stop stuff like this happening. They're urging the government to make a number of key amendments to the bill. And joining me now from Westminster is, I understand it, GB News' absolutely freezing cold London reporter, Alice Porter. Alice, what's going on?
Good evening. Yes, we've had a number of bereaved families who have gathered in Westminster today, and they're putting forward a very key amendment to the long-awaited online safety bill, which would force social media companies to open up the data of children if it was believed to be a contributing factor in their death. And I'm joined now by Baroness Kidron, who's putting forward this amendment, and Lauren Lefebvre, whose son Breck died in relation to social media. I hate to start this interview by asking this question, but do you mind just reminding people of the role social media played in your son Breck's death?
Well, my son Breck, 14-year-old everyday schoolboy, was gaming with friends from school, and unfortunately it was a predator who was running the gaming group, and there was a lot of bullying from the predator online, and even then after bullying the other boys. And when my son, I asked him to stop spending time with this person because I felt like he was a danger. The predator then cyberstalked him. So it was on so many different platforms that I couldn't keep up of where they were interacting. I would cut off, certain games or aspects or platforms, and the predator would then come around and find my son Breck in another way. So it was very difficult to know what was really going on, and it went underground when I tried to forbid it.
And it was that relationship that sadly led to your son's death.
Yes, he was lured to the predator's flat, even after I had alerted teachers, police, other parents. I couldn't get the help that I needed because nobody knew what to do. And that's why I set up a charity called the Breck Foundation to try to educate everyone so that people will recognize the signs of grooming, whether it's happening on social media or gaming or any platform our children are using.
And that's very much the heart of this amendment that is so crucial, I guess, for people to understand, is that there are families at the heart of it who've lost loved ones. Can you just, perhaps Baroness Kidron, just explain this amendment, what it actually means for people?
Yeah, I want to say that each of the families has a very different story, and each of them is an absolute tragedy. But when it came to the point of trying to understand what the contributing factors were to their child's death, they hit an absolute roadblock. And this amendment really just sorts out that process. It appoints Ofcom, the regulator, as the point person between the family and the tech company. It puts it gives powers to coroners and responsibilities to coroners to really consider whether a tech platform or a regulated company, as they're called, has some part to play in the child's death. And then it makes a requirement of the tech company to preserve, to redact, and to bring forward that information. And I think that people don't realise that this can take years and years and years. And in the group of the families who are here in Parliament today, there are some families who've been right the way through the coroner inquest experience, and they still haven't had the information that they really want to give them comfort.
So what you're wanting is making sure, so for anyone who's watching so they understand this, is that if there's any child who dies in circumstances where social media has been a factor, a contributing factor, they can access their records. Some people listening to this or watching this may think, gosh, yes, it's obviously really difficult, their hearts go out to families, but some people may be uncomfortable with the idea of children's private records being opened up to their parents, and they may not have wanted them to see.
Yeah, I think the privacy angle is very important, and I'm actually a privacy campaigner myself, so I feel it very passionately. But I think that what we have done is we have constructed a system whereby Ofcom is the interlocutor. So there is no question that a family suddenly gets a child's information without some other process, a formal process, having been gone through. And I think the other thing that I just do want to say on behalf of the families is they are calling for a number of things, and most of those things are about keeping children safe in the first place. You cannot make the whole of the tech world safe, but it really is quite appalling. And if you hear the stories of the families, no human person could really deny them this opportunity.
Well, look, thank you so much, both of you, for speaking to us today. I wish you best of luck with your amendment on such an important issue that so many people, but this online safety bill has been very much long awaited for many families, and of course poses a number of questions when it comes to balancing regulation of the internet and free speech.
Alice, thank you very, very much. Alice Porter there, GBNews' London reports, just bringing you the latest there. Well, it's not just rail workers walking off the job, as today hundreds of staff at homelessness charity Shelter have also begun 2 weeks of strike action. The Unite union says that the 3% pay rise offered this year has left some of the charity staff unable to pay their rent and worried about the prospect of becoming homeless themselves. Regional officer for the Unite union, Peter Story, I believe, joins me now. Peter, thank you very, very much. So why are staff at shelter taking 2 weeks off in their busiest time of year?
So I don't know whether you pay rent yourself, Patrick, but those of the shelter workforce that do, which is the majority, they're young workers. You've got the cost of rent increasing by something like 15% at the moment. So inflation that includes the cost of housing, such as RPI, which is at 14.2%, means that a 3% pay award imposed on the staff, not negotiated, not agreed.
Can I ask who pays? You need to educate me a bit about shelter. I'll be honest with you. Who pays the staff's wages? Is it from government fund, or is it the organisation?
No. This is a charity, shelter charity. So they're facing an 11% real terms pay cut, which means 3% doesn't pay the rent.
Does it come from donations? So is it completely funded?
Yes, it does. It does.
Well,
Sorry, hang on. The worry is it's called reputational damage.
Well, what do you mean reputational damage? Reputational damage amongst the British public? It's the British public who generously donate stuff to shelter, essentially going on strike, asking the British public to pay
and we're
more.
asking them to continue to do that, because what we are hoping is that shelter wake up and realise, take a reality check about the cost of living crisis out there. You've got homeless.
Have they got the money, though?
Shelter. Let me finish what I'm saying, Patrick. You've got advisors dealing with housing insecurity, and they're facing housing insecurity themselves. They're young workers.
I'm very sympathetic to all of this.
Have to pay the rent.
Yeah, I get this, mate. I get this. But in terms of if their wages are coming directly from the public, does shelter say we haven't got the money in order to do this? Because presumably
it's about priorities, isn't it? If you've got a budget and you spend your budget, and then when that's run out, you say, well, we've got 3% left. Doesn't work. You've got to make your workforce your top priority.
Well, hang on a second. Not if you're a charity to protect the homeless. Surely the homeless is your top priority.
Well, yes, of course. And if the staff can't, if the staff can't do their job, you have to look after your staff. It's a bit like the NHS. It's the workers being exploited for their goodwill. If you choose to work in this sector of the economy, in the charity sector, you're working for love, but you still have to pay your bills, and you can't forever exploit that goodwill year after year when people take real terms pay cuts every year.
Yeah, but I'm just struggling to get to grips with exactly who is responsible for all of this, because it would appear to me that the ultimate buck relies on the shoulders of the British public, who are not doing enough, apparently, to donate money to shelter. But we're all skint as well.
No, it's not the public. The shelter have got the money.
So
they've got 17 million in reserve, of which they've spent 4 million.
Right, we're getting there.
Even right up to October of this year, when their staff were we're talking about going on strike. So we're making a pay claim that would give them a real terms. It would keep them level. That's the point, isn't it? Inflation's 14%, and they've asked for 10%.
Right,
we costed that. We know it's affordable. It's within their reserves. They can pay it. It's a matter of priorities.
And some people would argue that shelter is an openly left-leaning, arguably Labour-supporting organisation, which appears to be emphasised by the fact that Unite Union is indeed responsible for a lot of their workforce's strike action. Is this just a shameless attempt to use homeless people freezing to death on the streets to try to bring down a Tory government?
Well, if you were paying rent in London, a 15% increase, I don't think you would. Well,
just answer the question.
I'll tell you what. So the question it seems to be just an attack on Unite and the Labour Party. It's really not any relevance to the Labour Party whatsoever. This is simply about the workforce, who are very young and fairly low paid, and they can't afford to. I read out testimonials at the ACAS service to the management team about young families with young children, with the heating off. It's not just about the cost of rent going up, it's about the fact that the landlords have got all the power, right? So it's about that insecurity. So if you pay rent, you'll understand that, Patrick.
I mean, it is ironic, really, that for a charity that's dealing with homelessness, you do appear to be attacking landlords as well. But there we go. Peter Story, thank you very much.
No, I'm not.
You literally are. You just said it. There you go. Anyway, right. You're with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. Coming up, the Home Secretary says that she's going to do whatever she can to tackle the migrant crisis. So, what does that mean? And will it involve banning people who enter the country illegally from settling here? More on this issue in the next hour. I will be back in 2 ticks. Stay tuned.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere. Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Yes, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Patrick Christys here on GB News. Quite a lot of reactions to the interview I did before the break there about Shelter and their staff going on strike, being whipped up by the Unite Union. It has emerged, according to a quick Google search, the charity CEO of Shelter was on 122 grand a year in 2017. One would imagine that may have risen since then, but we'll have to find out for sure. Coming up this hour, the Home Secretary says that she's going to do whatever she can to stop illegal migrants arriving in the UK on small boats. No, this isn't deja vu. No, this isn't Groundhog Day. She's saying it again. It comes as a new report calls for those who enter illegally to be prevented from settling long term. There's nothing new about that. The only thing new about it would be if we actually enacted that policy. Suella Braverman says the numbers making the perilous journey were wholly unacceptable and unsustainable. I don't know about you, but I'm sick and tired of words and hot air, and I demand some action. Isn't it about time that we got some action? Should those people paying criminal gangs to come here illegally be denied the right to settle in Britain? It's emerged that 98% of people claiming to be from Afghanistan, Syria and Eritrea who come across in a small boat across the Channel are just granted leave to remain, and on top of that, they're doing it under reduced security checks. It is an absolute laughingstock. Anyway, a new trailer for Harry and Meghan's Netflix documentary has been released. I'll try not to throw up in my own mouth this time. It's revealed that the first episode will be available this Thursday. So, what bombshell claims does the new promo make? Well, shock horror, racism. And keep those emails coming in, gbviews@gbnews.uk. I want to hear your thoughts on all of the main stories. Yes, it's kicked off about the fact that Shelter are going on strike because, shock horror, they aren't getting enough public donations because we're all skint, and apparently we all need to pay more out of the goodness of our heart, otherwise homeless people will freeze to death. Also want to know whether or not you think Britain is being taken for a ride now when it comes to our asylum seeker policies. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Oh, and a bit of Harry and Meghan as well. Now it's news.
Good afternoon. It's 4 minutes past 5. I'm Tatiana Sanchez in the GB newsroom. Parents are being urged to look out for Strep A symptoms after the deaths of at least 6 children in the UK over recent weeks. Downing Street says the NHS is well prepared and there are no shortages of the antibiotics needed to treat the infection. More than 850 cases were reported in the week starting the 14th of November, compared to over 180 for the same period last year. Dr. Chris Smith says Strep A can easily be treated if the symptoms are caught early.
If you've got a bright red flushed appearance on your cheeks, that could be that you've got scarlet fever. This is one sign that the infection is becoming more significant, and it could then become an invasive infection. If a person doesn't get better with the normal trajectory of a cold, they've got those rash signs, they're also showing other signs of deterioration, then you should definitely seek a second opinion from your GP. And the good news is that if caught early, these strep infections respond reliably and reassuringly to cheap and cheerful, very safe antibiotics like amoxicillin.
The RMT is being urged to think again about staging rail strikes which threaten to bring travel chaos over Christmas. Number 10 says the current offer of an 8% pay rise over 2 years, as well as a guarantee of no compulsory redundancies before April 2024, is fair. It was rejected by the union, which says the deal won't protect its members and will lead to unsafe practices. Education Secretary Gillian Keegan says the offer should have been put to members.
Well, the government has facilitated the conversations between the unions and the rail companies, and it is disappointing that the RMT union have rejected a new and improved offer that was being worked on over the weekend by the rail companies. I believe they've rejected it, not put that to their members. But this is disappointing because we would expect those talks to continue and for those offers to be put to members.
Labour says it will look at abolishing the House of Lords if it wins the next general election. Sir Keir Starmer set out his blueprint for a new Britain during a speech in Leeds, promising the biggest ever transfer of power from Westminster to nations and regions if his party comes into power. Launching a report which was led by former Prime Minister Gordon Brown, he vowed to overhaul the way the country is governed.
This broken model has held back our politics and held back our economy. And I'm determined we unbind ourselves and free our potential. Britain is one of the most centralised systems in Europe, and the centre has not delivered. Now, I don't want it to fall apart. I want us to build something new.
Downing Street says it's confident the UK has sufficient energy supplies ahead of temperatures severely set to drop this week. A cold weather alert has been issued for England, with severe conditions forecast from 6 p.m. Wednesday to next Monday. A yellow warning for snow has also been issued for northern Scotland, with temperatures expected to fall to as low as -10 overnight. Healthcare services are urging people to protect vulnerable and high-risk groups. Police say watches and jewellery were stolen during a burglary at Raheem Sterling's home. The England forward's family came home to find a number of items were missing, but Surrey police say it's not clear when they were taken. Manager Gareth Southgate hasn't been able to confirm whether the footballer will return to Qatar to play in the World Cup quarter-final this weekend. Meanwhile, England is now preparing to take on reigning champions France on Saturday. Bukayo Saka scored against Senegal last night in the 3-0 victory. He says England have nothing to fear in their upcoming clash.
There's no doubt, the quality we have in our team. We're blessed with an amazing front line with so much quality attacking players, and when you get selected in that lineup, it shows how much confidence and trust the coach puts in you, so it gives you that extra confidence to go out there and shine, and last night you were able to do that.
Prince Harry has spoken about the pain and suffering of women marrying into the royal family, calling it an institution. The latest allegation was made in a Netflix docuseries that airs this week.
There's a hierarchy of the family. There's leaking, but there's also planting of stories.
There was a war against Meghan to suit other people's agendas.
It's about hatred. It's about race. It's a dirty game. The pain and suffering of women marrying into this institution, this feeding frenzy.
I realized they're never going to protect you.
I was terrified. I didn't want history to repeat itself.
This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Patrick.
Well, it is actually a massive day yet again for illegal immigration into this country. ID cards, more offshore migrant processing centres and a new human rights law. Yes, those are just some of the recommendations in a new report. You'd be forgiven for thinking that you've got déjà vu or it's Groundhog Day. This is a new report which focuses on how we can crack down on the Channel migrant crisis. We are just saying the same stuff over and over again now, aren't we? In a foreword, the Home Secretary pledged to do whatever it takes to reduce the numbers making the illegal crossing. The publication from the Centre of Policy Studies think tank also recommends stopping those who enter the country illegally settling in the UK. I mean, yes, that would be a nice touch, wouldn't it? May I just shock you, although perhaps this isn't too shocking, to announce to you anyway that we now have officially a two-tier asylum system in the UK. So perhaps you would think that maybe we weren't secure enough when it comes to what's going on in the Channel. Well, you might be shocked to know that Afghans, Syrians and Eritreans are being largely waved through with stripped-back security checks to the tune of 98% of applicants, asylum applicants, into the UK because we're so overwhelmed. They're going, right, Afghanistan, Syria, Eritrea will wave you through with minimum threats. Now, forgive me, but Afghanistan and Syria are two countries that traditionally have not meant us particularly well in the past, and now apparently they are being waved through. How does that make you feel? It also comes as a hotel, right, was given 15 hours' notice that they had to house 80 asylum seekers. That's the third asylum seeker hotel in Morecambe and Lunesdale, bordering Lancaster as well. Meanwhile, the head of housing at Lancaster Council has written to the Home Office to express his anger that the local authority were given just 15 hours' notice of those 80 migrants, but also the fact, and I think this is important, and it's about time somebody said it, that conflict is inevitable. And it is, isn't it? If you keep using Britain as just a plot of land that is a dumping ground for a multicultural melting pot without any provision on how we're going to deal with this or any consent from communities or the public, it is a matter of time before it kicks right off. Earlier, I spoke to the Conservative MP for the area, David Morris, who told me what he wanted to actually see from the Home Office.
I think that if you're looking at what the Immigration Minister wants to do in the Home Secretary, they want to amend certain laws that we've already got. And I think that's the best way ahead. The main thing that we have to start to do is to start to deport people who are coming across here illegally as quick as possible and not have all the legal backlog, shall we say, that slows it up.
Well, today's report also calls for changes to the human rights laws and for Britain to withdraw from the European Convention on Human Rights, which, again, we have heard many times before, but we've had absolutely no progress on it. It's like we're wading through treacle. Let's talk now to barrister Rebecca Butler. Rebecca, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. A massive concern for people on numerous different fronts. The numbers continue to rise. 50,000 people predicted to have made their way across the Channel by the end of this year. Of those, as we understand it, 33,000 are at least claiming to be from Afghanistan, Syria Syria or Eritrea. 98% of those have just been granted asylum, of those people processed so far. People have a right to be concerned about public safety. In terms of us actually pulling out of the ECHR, what would have to happen in order for us to do that? Because I'm just deeply sceptical it'll happen.
Well, we'd have to unravel the whole Brexit deal for a start. Our wonderful politicians negotiated us into ECHR and to remain there during the Brexit withdrawal negotiations. So withdrawing from ECHR, I'm afraid, it's a complete lie if anybody says they're going to do that. What they could do as a step is repeal the Human Rights Act, because that doesn't remove us from ECHR, but what it does is it removes human rights arguments at all levels of our court system.
Does that include, can I ask, sorry to interrupt, but I think you might have just hit on exactly a point I want to make there. Does that include things like this modern slavery law, which is, as far as I can tell, lunacy, where somebody can willingly pay an individual thousands of pounds in order to transport them to somewhere, like a very expensive Uber, and then be dropped off in the exact destination they've wanted to be dropped off at, and then claim that they were brought here against their will? Is that involved in the Human Rights Act?
Well, that's actually not a human rights point, as a matter of fact. That's an it's a factual point that's raised at the tribunal level. And, you know, as I'm sure you know, Patrick, but your viewers would be interested to know that an asylum claim is harder to prove, evidentially, than a modern slavery claim. So this is why people who are not coming from countries where they are seeking asylum, I'm talking Albanians specifically here, they claim modern slavery because the evidential burden is significantly lower than claiming asylum, which is a claim doomed to fail anyway from Albania. But, you know, you talked about Afghanistan asylum seekers. Well, we do have a safe legal route for Afghan asylum seekers into the UK. So I think they need to be taken out of the narrative. But Syria and Eritrea, those people would have to prove an asylum claim. And I would have thought the burden on that wouldn't be too high. The current problem we have is with people trafficking across the channel from Albanians coming through the Schengen area entirely legally, because they do have a visa arrangement with the EU now, between Albania and the EU. They come all the way across, and rather than jumping on an aeroplane where they know they're going to get stopped and challenged, they will just come over on the dinghy and then come in through that illegal route. Now, the Nationality and Borders Act said that as of January, all arrivals coming through illegal routes will be prosecuted. There hasn't been a single prosecution, and the prospect of there being a prosecution is also close to
Rebecca,
zero.
let me just stop you there again, because I don't want that to get lost in the ether, actually, when we talk about this. So we have said, have we, that people coming here through illegal routes will be prosecuted, and we have had a record year of people crossing the channel, and yet, as you've just revealed here, not a single person has been prosecuted.
Yeah. I mean, but the government that makes a lot of noise and doing whatever it takes, I've heard that so many times now.
Yeah,
the same government hands over 150 million a year to the charities who support people to undermine our system. So, you know, what we're looking at is politicians who say that they will do whatever it takes, but they actually have zero intention of doing what it takes. First of all, the Brexit withdrawal deal will fall apart if we pull out of ECHR. Pulling out of ECHR was never in Boris Johnson's manifesto, but it was in both David Cameron's and Theresa May's manifestos. So 2010, 2015, 2017, we always had a commitment to leaving ECHR. Boris Johnson was silent on it. Boris Johnson wasted massive political capital, massive parliamentary majority. Now Rishi Sunak is left in a situation where politically, I don't think he can actually do anything, because Keir Starmer will literally stymie him on every attempt to get rid of HRA, which is, as you will recall, Tony Blair's flagship human rights
The root of a lot of things. No, again, I mean, I think it's about time, Rebecca, that you had your own show here, actually, because I could listen to you all day. I'm quite inclined to just step aside and give the floor to you. But you've taken the words out of my mouth. When it comes to all of this talking tough, I was dazzled this morning. I woke up to reports on my phone. A new report. And actually, it just says the same old tosh and guff that we've heard millions of times before. The Home Secretary, this particular Home Secretary, turns up, says exactly the same stuff. I'll do whatever it takes. But actually, from your legal expertise, you really don't think that there's any intention whatsoever to do anything. So, in order to take that to its natural conclusion, we are being lied to, are we not?
Well, they've got a Nationality and Borders Act, 2022, I beg your pardon. They haven't fully implemented it. The regulations aren't in place. We've had a piecemeal implementation, which, by the way, isn't unusual, but it is on the statute book. Home Office, because of absence of political pressure, hasn't actually fully implemented it. We also have a system where charities are being funded to act against the government, and that is taxpayers are being asked to fund those charities, very much against their will, if you read Twitter and Facebook, as you and I do. You then have a 2.1 billion asylum industry in the UK, which is hotels, the legal aid bills, the lawyers that represent people through the system, and a government that refuses to change the law but prefers to blame the lawyers. So they'd call me a lefty lawyer when I represent an immigrant, but they write the law. All I do is represent somebody in court. And I'll tell you what, you don't want an alternative of people representing themselves. You know that as a lawyer. But, we do need to represent people through the courts. Otherwise, it would be a shambolic approach to everything if we don't give people some assistance in court. It's desperately important. But anybody who says we'll do whatever it takes, you'll lose your whole Brexit deal. The whole withdrawal deal will disappear if you do.
Look, it's fascinating stuff. Rebecca, thank you very, very much. Rebecca Butler there, who is a barrister who's just discussing, let's be honest, the latest guff when it comes to our immigration system. One thing that I'm going to do, actually, she's kind of turned me on to something there, which is about taxpayers funding the charities that are basically helping to stifle what we're trying to stop in the channel. And I think that is worth an investigation. So I suspect that later on in the week, ladies and gentlemen, we will try to bring something like that to you here, right here on this particular show. But we're going to step away from the migrant crisis for a second. I mean, get these views coming in thick and fast. GBviews at gbnews.uk. A lot of people up in arms when it's come to this. I mean, it's emerged there from a barrister that we actually have zero intention, it would appear politically, of doing anything about all of this. GBviews at gbnews.uk. But get your thermals out, fill up the old thermos flask, wrap up warm, because temperatures are expected to drop drastically after Wednesday night. A weather system dubbed... the troll from Trondheim. Who comes up? It's like when someone calls a hurricane Alan, isn't it? Anyway, the troll from Trondheim is on the way. The Met Office has issued a level 3 amber alert for severe cold weather in England and has warned of a risk to elderly and vulnerable people. Of course, whilst my sympathies go towards elderly and vulnerable people, indeed, and with the cost of living crisis as well, I completely acknowledge that people are struggling to pay their heating bills, but we do live in the UK. Every single year in winter it gets quite chilly, and it amazes me when you see those pictures of like Norwegian children shoveling snow off and just getting to school, public transport running, and over here we've got like, oh, it's snowing a little bit, and everything shuts down. We are, when it comes to weather, quite pathetic. Jim Dale joins me now. He's a senior meteorologist with the British Weather Services. Jim, thank you very much. Right, OK, so it's going to get a bit chilly this winter, is it? And we're not going to be able to handle it?
We don't usually handle it, do we?
No.
Let's face it. And by the way, I am the troll man. It was my little name there for the Trondheims, because that's where that system's coming from. It's not the beast from the east. Are we going to handle it? I'll tell you what. First thing to say is this is a long one. This comes in tomorrow in northern Scotland, and it will very slowly move its way south during the course of Wednesday and Thursday. By the time we get to Friday, we'll be all in it, and it's very much polar air. So behind the polar front, which has gone south towards Spain for a change, and there's going to be snow packing in, particularly in the north to begin with. But I think in time, and I'm talking this time going on for 14 days potentially ahead of Christmas, it's going to get there.
Well, in a way, it almost renders the rail strikes null and void, doesn't it? Because they've coincided it with a period of time when they probably would have cancelled the whole service anyway. But can I ask, shamelessly using my platform on a national news service to just further my own interests, Jim, I'm supposed to be flying to Aberdeen on Saturday. Is there any chance I will get there?
You're flying from Heathrow, yeah, or Luton?
Yeah. Heathrow, I think.
Yeah, you'll fly off okay. Whether you actually land is another question. I think you probably will, to be frank with you. But look, let's not underscore this one. There's going to be a lot of people out there, particularly towards the Christmas period and what have you, who I know it's nice to have the snow occasionally for a couple of 3 days, but that's going to be a lot of snow that's going to last for a fortnight and more, potentially into that Christmas period. And there are people out there who are going to struggle, to say the least. So we've been putting warnings out for the last 2 weeks, to be honest with you, that this was coming. And, you know, the difficulties that this brings in terms of accidents, in terms of motor problems, you know, your car not starting, getting to the shops. You know, there's an awful lot of people who struggle when there's ice and snow on the road. And believe me, Patrick, this will become, if it's not going to be the #1 story, then it'll certainly be up there amongst it in this next fortnight.
Well, look, absolutely, and not trying to diminish it. I mean, I know there is a slightly comical element to it, which is that we do seem to cripple whenever we have half an inch of snow or anything like that at all. But on a serious note, I do know, especially in the cost of living crisis, people will be struggling. The vulnerable, the elderly, the homeless as well. And don't get me started on the fact that Shelter are going on strike. I've had enough of this rubbish. But anyway, how cold are we expecting it to get? I know it's almost difficult to say across the UK, but just give us something to cling on to. How cold is it going to be?
As time goes on, let me just say, probably the teeth of it will be in the Highlands and Grampians. And I think we will see figures like -15, -16 in time. That will unravel. But even down into, say, central southern England or towards, say, the Bristol area, I think we can see -6s, 7s, 8s, that type of thing. I think mostly the coasts are always tending to be a little bit less cold. So -1s, 0s, that type of thing. But for most people, and especially in the frost hollows, we're going to unravel and we're going to see those -5s, 6s quite comfortably. And as I've mentioned, Scotland in particular, the glens down into those silly temperatures that you normally see where the trolls live.
Weather trolls, lovely stuff. Jim, thank you very much. And I apologise for poking fun at your troll from Trondheim thing. Of course, if I'd have known that was your invention, I would never have slagged this off.
Don't worry.
Thank you very much. He's a senior meteorologist at the British Weather Service. Is yet another guest who will never come back on my show. You are with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. Coming up, oil prices have risen this morning, which could see petrol and diesel prices rise even more in the days ahead. Our economic and business editor, Liam Halligan, has the details. He'll be joining me soon. And yes, Harry and Meghan, they've released a new trailer for their Netflix documentary. They've gone heavy on the racism. They're probably going to go heavy on the sexism. They've certainly gone very hard on the vomit. Will appear shocked. They appear shocked that the royal family has a hierarchy. Even I didn't think that Prince Harry was as thick as that. I'll be back in a moment.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Yes, welcome back, everybody. Now, the Confederation of British Industry says the UK economy will shrink next year, with GDP falling 0.4%. Meanwhile, the government has today launched a review to prevent small firms being ripped off by larger companies. And this morning, oil prices have spiked, rising almost 2%, which could see petrol and diesel prices rise even more in the days ahead. So it's non-stop good news, basically, ladies and gentlemen. To make sense of all of this and hopefully find some kind of glimmer of hope in this unrelenting darkness is our economic and business editor, Liam Halligan, with On the Money. Liam, cheer me up.
These are tough times, Patrick, I must say. Having said that, look, the good news is that the CBI represents 190,000 companies. They're saying next year the economy is going to contract by 0.4%, whereas the OBR, the official forecaster, says it's going to contract by 1.4%. So it's a bit better than we thought, if you believe the business leaders, as opposed to the Whitehall boffins. At the same time, next year, 2023, unemployment's going to go up from 3.6% to 5%, say the CBI. But if that is the peak, that will be the lowest peak in unemployment for decades. So, you know, it really is swings and roundabouts. And inflation, there is good news on inflation. The cost of living, the CBI is saying, whereas inflation's 11.1% this year, then it's going to go down to 6.5% next year. So again, it's not great. These are tough economic times. All GB News viewers and listeners can feel it. Everyone in the newsroom here in GB News can feel it. But according to the CBI, these forecasts are brighter or less worrying than the OBR's forecasts that came out at the time of that autumn statement last month.
Can I ask?
So I put positive gloss on it. There for
you have done. Now, can I ask how we compare on the international stage? Because I quite often get MPs or people from various different groups saying to me, "Oh, look, our GDPs are one of the lowest in the G20 or whatever," and I always wonder, well, how are we doing compared to our international
We're
friends?
middle of the pack. Now, in terms of our growth in 2022, that's likely to be higher than other G7 countries, but then our lockdown was deeper than other G7 countries, and we lost more output during lockdown. And another bit of good news is this. Well, I hope it's good news. Many people listening and watching will work for small businesses. They'll maybe run small businesses. Everyone knows that in the small business sector, a real bone of contention is late payment, when big companies owe you money and they don't pay you. And what happens, Patrick, when inflation gets high as it is now, late payment becomes endemic. Because if I'm a big company, you're a small company, and I owe you 100 quid, for instance, then I'll wait as long as I can if I'm being unscrupulous, because by the time I give you that 100 quid 2 or 3 months late, it's worth a lot less.
Right.
And I could have used that 100 quid to spend on something so you endure the inflation rather than me.
That's a bit mean.
And Whitehall knows that this happens. The civil servants and politicians know that this happened. That's so the government over the weekend, and it was formally announced this morning, they've launched this review of late payment, trying to encourage big firms to basically play the game with smaller firms and don't squeeze your smaller suppliers to try and bully them or to try and get better terms out of them by delaying payments, particularly in inflation. Because as all small business leaders know, cash is king. If you run out of cash, your business folds. So that's another little bit of good news because the government is trying to put a bit of pressure on big businesses.
Liam, look, thank you very, very much. I must say that was massively enlightening. Liam Halligan there, our economics and business editor, just whizzing you through the latest facts and figures and, well, at least trying a little bit of positivity anyway. Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed you're right about the good stuff. Anyway, you are with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. Next up, we'll speak to a former Home Office minister about whether proposals published today to stop illegal migrants settling in the UK would work in practice. Spoiler alert, no, they don't. Anyway, and I'll ask the former head of Royal Security what he makes of the new Harry and Meghan Netflix documentary trailer. It was released today. In fact, it was released as I was on my way into the studio and I just started screaming on the train. Anyway, they've gone heavy on racism and they appear shocked that the royal family has a hierarchy. The words thick as mints come to mind. But first, it's your latest news headlines.
Good afternoon, it's 5:33. I'm Tatiana Sanchez in the GB newsroom. Parents are being urged to look out for Strep A symptoms after the deaths of at least 6 children in the UK over recent weeks. Downing Street says the NHS is well prepared and there are no shortages of the antibiotics needed to treat the infection. More than 850 cases were reported in the week starting the 14th of November, compared to over 180 for the same period last year. Dr. Chris Smith says Strep A can be easily treated if the symptoms are caught early. The RMT is being urged to think again about staging rail strikes, which threaten to bring travel chaos over Christmas. Number 10 says the current offer of an 8% pay rise over 2 years, as well as a guarantee of no compulsory redundancies before April 2024, is fair. It was rejected by the union, which says the deal won't protect its members and will lead to unsafe practices. Labour says it will look at abolishing the House of Lords if it wins the next general election, describing the current system as indefensible. Sir Keir Starmer has set out his blueprint for a new Britain, promising the biggest ever transfer of power from Westminster to nations and regions if his party comes into power. Downing Street says it's confident the UK has sufficient energy supplies as the country braces for a sudden cold snap. A cold weather alert has been issued for England, with severe conditions forecast from 6 p.m. Wednesday to next Monday. A yellow warning for snow has also been issued for northern Scotland, with temperatures expected to fall to as low as -10 overnight. TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2171 and 1.1593 euros. The price of gold is £1,454 and 91 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100 closed at 7,567 points.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Let's crack straight on. Shortly, I'll be speaking to the former head of Royal Security about the Harry and Meghan documentary trailer, but my inbox is full, jam-packed full of people's thoughts on this. It is amazing. I know. I don't really like the Harry and Meghan stuff either, but I am going to watch it. I'm going to hold my hands up to that now. It is gripping, and clearly lots of you are as well. You moan about it, you'll watch it, OK? Lots of you have been getting in touch with your views on their forthcoming documentary. The trailer just dropped today. Helen says, grief. Harry is disgusting to his family and living off his dead mother's memory. Shame on him. If they're so unhappy, they need to give up their titles. I actually I'm perplexed to see what new is coming out of this. It is now quite a while since they decided to leave the royal family and the trust fund and go and cry into Oprah's bosom, and Harry's got a book coming out. What new stuff is there to come out? I mean, it is quite sad and pathetic, and it's a bit like a jilted ex that you'd arguably just take a restraining order out against, isn't it? Jim says, thank God for William and Catherine, two proper royals intent upon dignity and service to the nation, like our dear late Queen. Yeah, absolutely. Prince Harry is now basically a Ginger Kardashian, isn't he, with what's going on in the Netflix documentary? I mean, I will watch it, like I've said, but I mean, come on. What next? It's just going to be him eating salad and going to the Met Gala. David says, we've cancelled our Netflix subscription because we're offended at this attack on the monarchy. We're not prepared to give our money to those people. I mean, to be fair, this is going to be something produced by a load of woke Americans, a lot of people who have absolutely no idea about our royal family, i.e., as well, a couple of people who used to be in it, Meghan and Harry, just doing their best to slam a key British institution, and with it, I would argue, damaging the reputation of Britain. I think it's shameful, and to be honest with you, I don't think after this emerges, Prince Harry will be safe to walk the streets of Britain. Anyway, let's have a look at Labour's vision for the country from one bleak prospect to another. Sir Keir Starmer has effectively declared war on the House of Lords, another key British institution crumbling around us, anyway, by outlining his plans to reconsider abolishing it if the Labour government is elected to power. It's part of Labour's plans for mass democratic overhaul of the UK and to distribute power away from Westminster. A lot of people might be thinking to themselves, what on earth was I listening to? As we had Keir Starmer on before, we had a bit of Gordon Brown, didn't we? Yes, he's still alive. And we were told, you know, OK, we've got to be constitutional reform. We're going to abolish the House of Lords. We're going to do our best to bring it all out to the regions. Yeah, but what does it all really mean? Is it all just guff? Political consultant and strategist Peter Barnes joins me in the studio now. Peter, is it just guff?
Pretty much.
Right.
Yeah. Keir Starmer obviously got up there and promises the world, and the reality is there's no actual plan behind it. This is Keir Starmer's kind of go-to at the moment. Say lots of things and hope nobody holds him accountable for it. If you look at some of the plans, he wants to move 50,000 civil servants out of London. Sounds like a great idea, but most people work remotely anyway, so it doesn't make much difference.
That's true.
You know, one of the most interesting aspects of the actual speech was, within it, kind of tucked away nicely, was he wants to somehow involve the Scottish Parliament in international treaties.
Yeah.
How that's going to work, I have no idea. So this is the fundamental problem. He's promising a lot. There's no plan behind it. It seems a little populist. Just, you know, keep the base on side. I just hope nobody holds him accountable or asks him the difficult questions about it.
It is fascinating. I'm glad you raised this about the idea that the Scottish government essentially would now be involved in international treaties. I mean, the whole process at the moment with the House of Lords is some argue that it stifles democracy, that it slows things down. I fail to see how some form of presumably elected regional-based chamber, given the fact that we are quite divided as a United Kingdom at the moment, how would that not stifle political process in this country?
Oh, it does, but there's a point between stifling and just saying, wait a minute, let's slow down. That's the kind of original purpose of the House of Lords since its last set of reforms. It's just kind of just to be a double check on everything, make sure everything's quite right. And because it's supposed to be out of the political sphere and out of political influence, it's supposed to be a little bit more independent. The problem that we have is it's been packed full of former politicos.
Well, this is it.
People like that.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought me on to that. I mean, look, it's one of the issues the House of Lords. I normally like to have quite strong views on everything. Whether or not they're right is another question, but I normally like to have quite strong views on it. The House of Lords is one that I've got to be honest with you, I'm quite divided on. I can see the fundamental point of it. I can also see people on the take falling asleep on leather sofas. And how do you feel about it in its current form? Is it just stacked full of people who, frankly, there's no need for them to be there?
Yeah, pretty much.
Cronies.
Yeah, there's pretty much an old saying in politics that the House of Lords is the most expensive daycare centre in the world. But the reality is there are some people in there that do some amazing work, and realistically, if they were put forward to the electorate or they got caught up in the political machine, those expertise would be lost. What we really need, instead of just throwing the baby out with the bathwater, is actual proper reform. The Blair reforms, what an old professor of mine used to call constitutional terrorism, didn't really go far enough, and it kind of led us to where we are. When it comes to kind of how people feel about the House of Lords, I think over the Brexit kind of chaos, I think a lot of people fell out of love with the House of Lords because they were the ones that kind of blocking a lot of this
stuff.
Well,
they were playing ping-pong with democracy.
Yes, and, you know, it happens with a couple of other bills and things, and, yeah, I can understand why people get frustrated with it. But again, if we did remove the kind of political element of it rather than adding more politics to it, there's an argument that it could be more useful than it is now.
So it's not just full of a load of old duffers on the take?
No, not mainly, no. Don't get me wrong, there are some people in there. You still have the hereditary peers, we still have the bishop. You know, there are still some issues with who makes up the House of Lords, but that's what we should be tackling, not just getting rid of the whole thing.
And another element to this, which is that Keir Starmer... Well, whether or not this is policy is up for debate, because it is just a lot of words without a huge amount of substance. But at least it's something, because for a while he was just, as I said before, so wooden that birds were nesting in him, and I couldn't glean any kind of policy out of him whatsoever. But it's interesting for me that he's got Gordon Brown involved. There was talk, at least for a little while, of David Miliband getting back in. I mean, is this kind of like Blair 2.0? Is he just bringing out... It's not exactly new Labour, it's old Labour, is it?
Well, pretty much, because even Douglas Alexander has been rumoured that he wants his old seat back. So it is interesting how they're trying to get the band back together again.
Yeah.
If I was a Labour Party member, I'd be asking, well, where were you during the hard years under Corbyn? They seem to up and run and... you know, got nice cushy jobs, earning nice big salaries, and now they want back in. So I'd be asking those kind of questions. But, yeah, when it comes to kind of getting Gordon Brown involved, he was the author of this rather hefty report. It is a big, chunky document. Yeah, he was sat there. It did kind of look like take your son to work kind of situation. I don't know whether it's a good idea having Gordon Brown sat up there from a kind of visual perspective. But, it is interesting how the old figures are starting to creep back in.
Yes, it is indeed. Look, Peter, thank you very much. I've thoroughly enjoyed this. I'll have to get you back on very, very soon. That was, of course, the wonderful Peter Barnes, our political commentator, just picking you through what I think we can all agree now as a result of what Peter has just insightfully explained to us, guff from Keir Starmer. Anyway, that was political consultant and strategist Peter Barnes joining me in the studio. Right, we're moving on now, because the Home Secretary has made it very, very clear that she doesn't agree with all of the proposals in a new report to crack down on channel migrant crises. Well, this is despite writing the foreword to it, which I think sums up exactly where we are. The recommendation came from the Centre for Policy Studies, and it included introducing ID cards, stopping those who enter the country illegally from settling in the UK, more offshore centres to process migrants. Suella Braverman did, however, pledge to do whatever it takes to reduce numbers. Look, I'm not even going to finish this because I'm absolutely blooming sick of it, and I'm sure you all are as well. We have a new report that literally proposes exactly the same things that people have been saying for years, with the Home Secretary saying that she will do all it takes to do what she's been saying that she'll do all it takes for her to do for years. And this comes about something that you will see a lot less prominently in other media forms. 98% of Afghan, Syrians and Eritreans who apparently have crossed the Channel, this is according to the Times, have been granted asylum in this country with a stripped-back security check because you've got such a big backlog. That also includes 87% of the Sudanese and 82% of the Iranians. We now have essentially a two-tier asylum system where, because our backlog is so large, we are, well, not far off waving people through. And in some constituencies, as a result of this massive backlog, you are ending up with not one, not two, but three asylum seeker hotels at the cost to the taxpayer. And in the case of one in Lancaster, Morecambe and Lonsdale, I should say, near Lancaster, they were given 15 hours' notice to house 80 asylum seekers. Absolutely bonkers. Joining me now is Politico, household name, Norman Baker. Norman, thank you very, very much. And it's great to see you dressed up for the occasion as well. I don't think I could quite pull that attire off, but it's fantastic. Look, the fact is that we are dealing now with a load of utter guff. And I would say that the 98% figure of Afghans, Syrians and Eritreans being waved through without any severe security checks should be the top story, and not the fact that a report has come out from the Centre for Policy Studies which is asking us to just do the things that we've been asking to do for years.
Well, Patrick, I'll tell you what I think this top story should be, which is the huge backlog. That's the story, because the reality is that over the years, the Home Office has failed to come up with any system which processes people quickly. I mean, if we had a system which processed people quickly to determine who is eligible for refugee status and who isn't, that would solve the problem. The problem, we've got such a backlog here, it's lasting months, years.
Yeah, but the reality is the way that we are now trying to handle that backlog is to do fewer security checks on people from countries that we've been at war with for however long, like Afghanistan, for example. Yeah, OK, all right. Syria as well. Loads of British citizens went to Syria to join ISIS. Eritrea, all right, yeah, fine. We've not had a huge amount to do with them. Sudan, Iran, don't exactly wish as well. And our response to this, the bright sparks in Downing Street or in Westminster or wherever have gone, well, actually, we'll just do fewer security checks on this lot.
Well, I don't agree with fewer security checks, but I also say to you that we haven't been at war with the people probably who are coming here. The people who are coming here often may well be the people who are being persecuted by the ghastly regimes in those countries. But look, if you look at the figures before we actually speeded things up, and I don't agree with what you've just been telling me that is a good idea. It's not a good idea to evade security checks. Most people from those countries were actually assessed and deemed to be genuine refugees. The people who are not genuine refugees are those who are coming here for economic reasons, which are predominantly not the countries you've listed, but places like Albania. And what we should be doing is identifying very quickly those who are coming here without due reason and get those packed off back to their countries. That's part of the answer.
Norman, I've got to cut in. Unfortunately, apparently the audio is not particularly great, but I could hear you clear enough. Norman Baker there, a former Home Office Minister. For what it's worth, he was talking absolute sense. Norman, I'd love to get you back on very, very soon. What do you think about these reports, of course, that are coming through to us now? Can I just say that people may well get their heads a bit lost in this idea. The Centre for Policy Studies have released this report that says that, OK, we should have more offshore processing, i.e. we should do more deals with the likes of Rwanda, we should get out of the ECHR, and we should not allow people leave to remain if they get here illegally. This is not new, OK? This is stuff that people have been saying. The fact we've been blocked from doing it. We've then got a Home Secretary, bless her, Suella Braverman, whose heart, I think, probably is in the right place, coming out and saying she'll do everything that we can. Well, the result is that she can't do that much, can she? And so we're back where we started. And in the meantime, it's emerged that we essentially, and I can't believe I'm saying this, we essentially have an open border policy with Afghanistan, Syria and Eritrea. GBViews at gbnews.uk. It's a two-tier asylum system. And, yes, the hotel situation is getting even worse, including in the face of people of Morecambe and Lonsdale who had an asylum seeker hotel, the third in the region, dropped on them at 15 hours' notice. Coming up, a new trailer for Harry and Meghan's Netflix documentary has been released, revealing the first episode will be available this Thursday. What bombshell claims will the promo take? It's racism, it's sexism, it's vomit-inducing bile. Back in a moment.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late-night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton Tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel. Welcome back. Now, a new trailer for Harry and Meghan's Netflix documentary has been released, which features Harry discussing his pain and suffering. My heart bleeds. The first 3 episodes of the docu-series will air on Thursday and include claims from the couple that those around them that criticism directed at Meghan is about her race, i.e. we were all frothing racist, despite the fact that, I don't know about you, I've got to be really honest about this, I didn't realise she was black until she told us. So what does the man who used to be responsible for the royal family's safety actually think? I am joined by Di Davies, the former head of royal security. Di, I mean, was the issue that Meghan wasn't protected enough, in her view, anything to do with race? Was the royal family deliberately not protecting Meghan Markle on the grounds of her race?
Absolutely not. She has, as we know, talked a load of nonsense. They were protected. And would be protected if they were still carrying out the functions of senior members of the royal family. Your previous correspondent used the word constitutional terrorist. Well, I'm afraid I'm going to apply that label to Harry and Meghan. What on earth are they trying to do? What is their motive? Is it to destroy the House of Windsor, aided and abetted by so many, I have to say, left-wing commentators? I spent all last week defending Hussey. Your colleague Nana did a far better job than I did in destroying that nonsense. She was brilliant, and I agreed with every word. And I tried and virtually said the same, but she has her power far more than I do. No, I'm really saddened that it's come to this. You know, a few months ago, we were lauding Her Majesty the Queen, and also King Charles and the Queen Consort. What on earth, other than perhaps the money, what is his motive? What is he on about?
Let's drill down in this. Let's drill down in this. I mean, what do you think his motive is? Because there are concerns, certainly as I can see. I just have to look him in the eyes, and I honestly wonder if he's mentally ill.
Well, as a former and still an investigator across the world, I'm just amazed. I don't know, other than this huge reward. I mean, I'm reminded this time of year about Jesus and how he was betrayed for 20 aspects of gold by Judas Iscariot. I think that the same can be applied to these two. I mean, historically, there is precedent for a new king to be taken apart by his brother. Well, this is what exactly is happening. We had it with the Duke of Windsor in the 30s. We now have exactly the same going on. What is their motive? And great respect, after half a century of investigating, I don't know what it is.
Well, I think the motive, as far as I can see, is pretty straightforward. It is to dismantle Buckingham Palace brick by brick and indeed shatter the reputation of people within it. But I tell you what, Di, they better make it stick. Whatever it is, they better make it stick. Because if they are attempting to dine out on the royal family's previous policy of not commenting really and ignoring it, well, that might change, because I suspect that the royal family might feel as though their backs are to the wall a little bit and they might come out swinging. And if they don't make it stick, they've got one crack at this, because Prince Harry essentially has got nothing more to say. And if he's just whinging about stuff in the past, I tell you what, he's starting to look like the kind of ex-girlfriend you'd get a restraining order out against. Di Davies, I wish I could carry on this conversation, but I'm being told that I've got to go. Former head of Royal Security, Di Davies there. Di, please come back on in the next couple of days. Thank you very much, because I want to watch this and get Di's reaction to it. Up next is Jubes & Co with Michelle Dewberry, who's right here in the studio. What you got coming up, Michelle?
Hello, Patrick. Yeah, it's been a big day, hasn't it, for Labour? They've introduced their plans basically for the future of the United Kingdom. Things like abolishing the House of Lords, more regional devolution, and so on and so forth. Those plans are open for consultation, so we're going to consult on them. I want my viewers' thoughts on that. Is this the future of the UK, these plans? Is it the right way forward? And I want to get into the whole regional aspect as well, because by now we all know, don't we, the disparities are huge. What, though, is the answer to it? And flexible working from now on going forward, when new legislation passes, you'll be able to request suggest it on day one of your new job. Brilliant for an employee who wouldn't want to work flexibly, Patrick. But I worry, that people, if they're not careful, they're just going to have their jobs outsourced to a different country. And lastly, prison bosses have warned that locking people up for 23 hours a day basically means that you're going to be reoffending potentially when you come out. So I'm asking, how should prisoners be treated?
Indeed, good stuff. Michelle, thank you very much. Michelle Dewberry will join you for Jubes & Co. in just a matter of a few moments. I, by the way, am filling in for Mark Stein himself, 8 until 9, and I have a box office rip-roaring show for you there, including the latest on the, I'll just say it, absolutely, in my view anyway, 100% COVID lab leak that took place. We've got some info on that for you. We're looking at how Twitter has been manipulating elections throughout the course of, well, frankly, Twitter's history. And yes, we will be dealing with the latest when it comes to the migrant crisis, and indeed a little bit more as well. We're dissecting Harry and Meghan some more. Yes, tune in for that. Obviously, Jubes & Co, but then stay tuned. I'll be back again. See you in a bit.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of